like it's about 1 o'clock, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
All right, well, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the Frankfort Plant Board, and we're here today, June 6, 2017, at 1 o'clock for a special board meeting. I'll have ask Kathy if she'll call the roll of directors, please.
Member Ludwig?
Here.
Member Green?
Here.
Member Cuban?
Here.
Member Baldwin?
Here.
Member Rosen? Here.
All right, all directors are present. This is an annual subject type of meeting. It's to review the proposed budget for the fiscal year 17-18. Our fiscal year, we're on a fiscal year basis at the plant board, like most government entities are. Our accounting year starts on July 1 and runs through July 30 of the following year. So the budget that we're discussing today is for the fiscal year starting July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2018. Our finance director and staff have worked very hard to present the board with the proposed budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff. Who's going to do any presenting?
Mr. Chairman, this is David Denton's project, and as in years past, Mr. Denton will lead the presentation.
Okay, David.
He just beat me, you know?
Well, if you can kind of guide us through this and hit the high points for us, David.
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon. What we're looking at today here to talk about focusing primarily on the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget. I wanted to kind of just take a minute for those that are here and watching us on Channel 10 and YouTube to kind of set the table, talk a little bit about FPB, some of the guidelines we're under and how we operate, and then we'll get into the budget preparation. So I just want to talk about how FPB is structured, that we are formed as an independent entity under Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 96, Section 172 through 188. So we're a nonprofit municipal utility. You'll hear me talk about more than once being a nonprofit, no profit motive. There are 4 things that we're looking at to use with the revenue generated from our customers. And that would be to cover our operating expenses, to be able to invest in infrastructure needs. That's a big part of what we do here. Also to pay down debt service. And then also the last thing would be to have a healthy reserve balance in order to keep a strong financial position. So those are the 4 things with the nonprofit that we're using all of our any revenue above our expenses to cover. It's worth noting that we, in those statutes, require that we have an annual external audit from a certified public accounting firm. Our board has retained Crowe Horwath for this the current fiscal year. They've actually already been on site for a week with us a couple weeks ago to get started, and things are going well there. So we'll have that report to the board around October. We are not considered, the plant board's not considered a component unit of the city of Frankfort. So what that means is our financial statements are completely separate from the city of Frankfort's financials. The city of Frankfort doesn't exercise any financial, budgetary, accounting, or administrative controls over the Frankfort Plant Board. We do pay the city, the city pays FPB $95,398 annually to bill and collect sewage fees, which we remit back to the city. The city of FPB makes the following payments to the city of Frankfort. Back in 2008, there was an agreement made that we would pay $25,000 a year over a 20-year period for $500,000 contribution to the flood wall. We'll make that final payment in June of 2017. We currently pay $80,000 annually for rent for the downtown office, and that will conclude whenever we move out of here and give the city 30 days notice when we move out here to 151 Flint Avenue. And then we have a $109,000 annual fee for use of city facilities that we pay to the city. That does increase every 5 years. It increases 10%. So I just wanted to put those things out there. FPB is also considered a special purpose governmental entity per Kentucky Revised Statute, Chapter 65A. There are several things that we must follow as an entity since we are considered an SPGE. One of the things, since it's appropriate, we're at the budget meetings, that we have to have a budget approved by July 1, our beginning of our fiscal year. We also must have that budget posted to the Department for Local Government website by July 16th, about the end of business, July 15th. Budget amendments made throughout the year, we also post those prior to the end of the fiscal year. So any amendments we make between the beginning of our fiscal year and the end, we'll get those posted to the Department of Local Government. So you can go out, not just our website and see our financials and audits, you can also go to the Department of Local Government website and see those as well. Talking about, you'll hear us throughout this budget, we're asking the board to approve 1-year plan, 17-18 budget. We present with that a additional 4 years. So you'll hear us talk throughout the budget process of year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. And I'm just showing it out here that we're asking for acceptance of the 17-18 budget, but we'll be laying out the next 4 years beyond that. It helps us to see how cash will work out with our large infrastructure projects, if any additional debt's needed, and see how our financial position looks as we lay out all these assumptions that come over the next 5 years. The adopted budget may be amended by the board throughout the fiscal year using the same process, so we can do that at any time. Management has the option to reallocate funds between operating and capital budgets as long as the total between the two does not change. Budget estimates is worth noting. I mean, this budget is one big estimate. So we've taken what we know of historic trends, our most recent operating results for the last fiscal year, and future known circumstances at the time we put this together to create the budget. So it's worth noting that we know that results will definitely vary. The actuals will vary from this budget, but we do the best we can to get something we think is going to hold throughout the year. Budgetary accounting. This budget enables us to look throughout the year to be able to execute control activities that are approved by the board and evaluate those. We provide budgeted to actual financial statements to the board each month. We also provide them to our creditors. Those are provided also to management and staff to look at see how their budget is looking throughout the year, how they're managing their, we talk about being the manager of your function and how each person has control over their department. So we provide those to everyone. Unused appropriations or amounts that we have not spent through the year do lapse, and we just start with a new year. You will hear us talk about carryover on capital projects, and that's just noting that we've approved and started a capital project that's flowing into the next year, but we do budget for those funds that we need to complete that project. And the amounts we show in our financial statements are the final authorized amounts. Budget goals. One of the things we look at, I mean, we have the big responsibility here of looking to bring value to our customers by maintaining a infrastructure for all of our lines of business to provide reliable electric, water, and telecommunication services at affordable rates, and also ensuring a sound financial position. And I believe as we walk through this and as you've looked at it, that's what we have done. Something that, I've been here 5 years and looking at that end of year cash reserve balance, and when you look at over the 5 years between the company as a whole, we are at or near our recommended minimum reserve balance throughout the 5 years, which is great. We've been below that in the past. Part of that, or a lot of that, is due to a $5 million estimated reduction in our wholesale power cost. Last year when we sat at this time, we weren't yet a member of KYMEA. The board since last year has voted to be a part of that organization, and through that we estimate in this budget conservatively that years 3, 4, and 5 have a reduction in wholesale power cost to the plant board of $5 million each. The water division, we've talked about how the water division in the past has had a negative reserve balance. I know electric has helped to kind of cash flow throughout time. If you look at year 5 of the water funding summary, you'll see that we actually show a positive reserve balance by year 5. So we are moving forward with the incremental rate increases we have, plus paying off some debt, managing costs, help to show that water division is getting back in the black with our reserves. So I think that's something to point out and note. We have 2 large debt lines that we pay off throughout this 5-year budget. It's the Series 2009 Electric and Water Revenue Bonds and our main FSN consolidated note that we will pay off in year 5 of this budget. So it's worth noting that as those debt payments continue to drop off, that's just that much cash that we have options to do other things with shore up our reserves, invest in capital projects, things of that nature. We plan to hire and retain highly skilled workforce of the future by maintaining and implementing the current compensation plan that FPB has had in place since 2014, I believe. And something interesting that I think is worth noting as a positive here is plan to increase reliability and speed of our broadband infrastructure while keeping rates and telecommunications flat in all lines of service except for cable TV. So when you think about what you pay today for all of the telecommunication services that we offer, with the exception of cable television, all those would stay flat. So we look forward to talking about that and showing how we believe we can do significant things to invest back into the plant board while at the same time maintaining rates that are at or near today's levels. When I got here today and looking at the screen, I noticed it's going to be very hard for you all to read that from the back. So I'll throw things on the screen, but also refer to page numbers for you all. I'd like to just go ahead and just start looking at, I want to talk briefly about the structure of the budget for those that are watching can kind of understand how this is laid out. We have our executive summary at the front that talks about each line of service and a general highlight of the plans over the next 5 years. We have within that is a budget assumption list that kind of lays out some of the primary or larger budget assumptions that we have this budget's based on, and we'll go through that as well. We have a company-wide section that provides and shows how the plant board, when you combine the three divisions, how we look from a financial performance perspective. That's our statement of revenue, expenses, and statement of net position. And we have the funding summary, which I'd say if you have one sheet to look at in this whole budget, it would be the company-wide funding summary that's located on page 9 of our budget. And we'll walk through that. There's a funding summary for each line of business and company-wide. This takes our statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position, which is accrual-based financial statement, and then converts that over into a cash balance statement that shows how you get back to adding in non-cash items, taking away things such as debt payments that will be used as cash, and also shows our infrastructure investments and lets the board see how our cash reserve balances look each of the 5 years. We move through the electric, water, and cable telecommunications sections. Each of those has a funding summary along with the statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position, so the board can see how they look as financial strength looks, and also how the financial performance year over year looks as well. And then we have the administrative overhead section. This walks through each of our administrative overhead departments, and I'll just walk through those so everyone can hear them. Just our general administration, expenses by the board of directors, our customer service department, our finance department, fleet services, human resources, information technologies, meter reading, our safety department, and support services. We show how the expenses for each of those divisions is allocated to each of our three main divisions, electric, water, telecom. So our board can look at each of those sections and see how each of our admin departments is performing, and also how they're allocated to each of the three main divisions. And then what I think is one of the most important parts, we have a section called line item detail. This is a section that lays out each budget item within our budget. It shows exactly what is composed, what makes up each line item. So if you want to look at continuing education, you could go through each division, through each department, and see exactly line by line what makes up any given balance. So complete transparency for anyone that wants to see what's behind the numbers. We have that section. I thought about I will continue to spend a little time here going over some general things, and then we would just jump right into our electric, water, cable, and our administrative departments. Depending on how time goes today, we'll see how far we get. But I think one of the first things here, I have this budget assumptions sheet that's shown over on page 8 of your budget. I'd like to start there. This is with the budget assumptions. If anything on this sheet changes, it ripples throughout the budget. And we're hitting some of the larger items here, such as payroll, some of our fringe benefits. We talk about assumptions in our usage in electric and water. And then we also show rates for our lines of service in telecom. But I would like first just to start on page 8. You know, in doing this over the years, we used to have a general inflation factor that we would put in this budget that would do a 2-3%, whatever CPI was, throughout the entire budget, every line item. And what you find is by the time you get to year 5, it looks like the sky is falling, and we're talking about rates that are so high that it makes for not a good news story, when that's really probably not the way things are going to happen. So we don't have a general inflation factor in here. Everything is just budgeted as we think. Pretty much as 17, 18 occurs, we push that number out throughout the rest of the years unless there's something known that we'll have in a different year. Salaries and wages. This is a little busy, but I also think it's worth throwing out there. If we look over on page 17 of the budget, this is a FPB Plant Board Payroll Summary. This shows the prior year, estimated budget to actual current year, and then the budget for the next 5 years of our wages, overtime, show new positions, also job reclassifications, and any step progressions that are expected. You know, some jobs, like lineman's a good example. You move through progression. Lineman 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I think, to journeyman is an example of step progressions within a job class. So I've got it up here on the screen as far as what the compensation plan shows, but the way the compensation plan is laid out is, you know, each job is put into a job classification and gives you a job grade. You have a minimum, midpoint, maximum of that grade. Any employee that is at the minimum, I should say below the midpoint of their grade, receives a 2% raise every 6 months. That's 2% July 1 and 2% January 1, as long as they have a satisfactory performance appraisal. So if they have a 3 or more on their employee performance appraisal below midpoint, they would receive that 2 and 2. For employees that are over the midpoint of their grade, the midpoint being market rate for their grade, would receive whatever the board approves during this budget process in the form of a cost of living increase or a merit raise. What is in this budget is a 2% cost of living. I think the last April CPI index showed it was around 2%, and that's what we have got in this budget. So that is a summary. I have a list in here. When you look at the total amount of expenses, you can see payroll on that far right pie chart. Payroll and our payroll taxes make up 14% of the budget. So I just thought we'd go through and walk through that process. That is how this budget is structured in regards to compensation. Let's look at the other, going back to this budget assumptions. We have health insurance. Health insurance, we are Frankfort Plant Board maintains a self-funded insurance plan. We have it's escaping on the name. We have a company, MedBen, that helps, is our plan administrator that administrates the plan for us. So included in our healthcare cost are the administrative plan fees, plus prescriptions, medical claims, and then we have separate dental and vision as well. Got a chart here that shows our healthcare cost over time. You can see between 2011 and what we're estimating in 2017, this current fiscal year, we've ranged between $2.4 to $2.5 million over that 6-year period. So we find ourselves kind of hanging in this range. We budgeted $2.7 million. MedBen, the administrator, has a lot of data on expected claims and history over time, and that the number that we've been provided is $2.7 million. It's worth noting that if you look at 2017, we budgeted $2.8 million, and we're expecting to come in at 2.4. So it's a $400,000 budget to actual variance to our benefit. With a self-funded plan, it just takes 1 or 2 bad health claims to make or break your year. So we have gone a conservative route in sticking with that expected claim amount that MedBen has given us, and that's what we show throughout the next 5 years. It's very possible that we could have another year like we have, but to be conservative and sticking with that expected claims amount is what we've chosen to go with. I was going to look at other things that we have as far as life insurance. Plant board provides life insurance to our employees at 2 times your salary, estimated at $35,000 a year. Pension, FPB is part of the Kentucky retirement system, the county employees retirement system. The contribution rate for FPB, we're in the non-hazardous plan, is going to be 19.18% starting July 1. I know that there's discussions and concerns about how that rate might escalate over the next several years, but we've decided in this budget scenario to keep it flat, the contribution rate at 19.18% over this 5-year period. I don't think it's ever gone over 20% yet, but I know that that is definitely something that's out there. But that's how we've gone about it. Social Security, Medicare, the plant board, being a nonprofit, there are certain fees and taxes we don't have to pay, but we definitely are not exempt from payroll taxes. So that's just 7.65% of your total wages that we have budgeted for payroll taxes. And then we are also, FPB, a self-funded plan in regards to our unemployment trust. We're part of the Kentucky League of Cities Unemployment Trust, and there's a percentage of gross wages that we pay in each period. You can see we're budgeting $23,000 to $26,000, escalating over time due to the amount of payroll that we have and the fact that payroll increases over those 5 years. So those are some of the large assumptions related primarily to salary and wages and benefits. I'd be glad to go into any questions or concerns or talk about those. What I'd like to do is flip over and move over and highlight about the company-wide funding summary. That one page that I mentioned, that if you don't look at any other page within the budget, that you would pay attention to this one.
Mr. Chairman, would this be a good time to ask a couple questions on the salary and retirement, or what do you prefer?
I think whatever David prefers.
I think I would love to have questions as they come. I think while they're hot on the mind, and we just go ahead and take care of it.
As you know, you and I've had a chance to have just a couple discussions, and the areas I've got some concerns on is one, because I know we've adopted a compensation plan, and I'm all for that and want to do everything we can for our employees, especially the younger employees coming up and so forth. I've got questions about for a couple reasons. One, and you referenced it a minute ago, based on the work the General Assembly currently has, state government to keep the pension systems afloat will have to find about $700 million a year each of the next 2 years, which means it's very likely state employees and teachers net will go another 2 years without a raise, unless they even raise more than $700 million. $700 million is a big lift to start with in a budget that probably will only grow about $250 million a year in normal growth. So there's $700 million there. We know that our state employees and our state retirees are getting nothing. Our state employees will get probably nothing. Teachers won't get anything. Retired teachers will get 1.5. City and county, what concerns me there is they did not vote on it last time, but the Kentucky retirement system, the rates they had in front of them for CERS non-hazardous would take our ARC from 19 to about 30%, which adds another $800,000 in cost to this. And it's very likely, I mean, the governor has continued to reiterate it, that we're going to probably know the fate, maybe, of where the retirement systems are going and costing it probably this fall. But whatever happens, it's going to be tough because county retirement systems at about 55% funded, which is far better than KRS, which is at 13%, but still 55% is not exactly home free. So there's going to be some tough decisions. And we talked some about the health care, and I think you've got in there holding the health care flat out into the out years. But are we looking at, has MedBen told us that we could expect about 11% jump in claims for next year? Is that the number they're running with? Because that's what we're taking from 2.4 to 2.7, about 11-12% bump.
Well, I think it's important to note, like I talked about with the current year, we had 2.8 million budgeted, but 2.4 million is what it looks like it might be. We had unfortunate life incidents come up. I mean, if you have, someone has some kind of severe illness, I mean, one person, one claim can blow your year or actually make your year if everyone stays relatively healthy. So they are just looking at historical information to give us what is a estimated claim year that you can expect. And last year it was around that 2.8.
And I think the health insurance is real important for employees because now, unfortunately, for an employee, you don't want them to ever have to use it because you don't want an illness. But if they do have to use it, that's a tax-free benefit. So, I mean, I think it's important to protect that benefits, but that's a $300,000 jump from 17 to 18. And then the salary compensation, I mean, I think at a minimum, I think we've got to be competitive with what the city, county, and everybody does. And Diane, have you had, in the city and county both looking about, what, 1.5, 2%, something like that?
The city, the information they gave me was 2% cost of living and a 1.5% merit.
Okay.
And then for the county, it's 5%. It's 2 and then 3.
2 and 3, 2%.
And 3%. So it's a total of 5%. That's projected, yeah.
Okay, for what they're discussing for the next,
Correct,
for the fiscal year starting July 1?
correct.
Okay.
We have had, in the last year, quite a bit of churn within the company as far as positions go. A lot of employees with service time that have retired, and you've got a ladder effect of people moving up and new employees coming in. Based on the actual claims paid from 2011 to today, I would not be surprised if we maintained and stayed within that $2.6 million range, 2.5. But I also, looking at conservative budgeting, and feel comfortable sticking with what MedBin with a significant amount of data over time, and our employee workforce. They know all of the good news on all of us with health and age and families and all that, to stick with that 2.7. But I think there's a potential for savings there if everyone gets out and eats healthy and jogs.
Diane, what was the numbers again for the city and the county?
The city, the information I got was they were planning a 2% cost of living and a 1.5% merit. And I think the cost of living is effective July and the 1.5 merit is effective in November. I believe.
Okay.
And then for the county, the information I got was a 5%, but I think that is broken up to where some of it is merit.
Okay. Part COLA for everybody and then part.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. I'd like to walk through and talk about this funding summary. We have, for company-wide in each division, and I can start showing the next page here. So this is looking at page 9. This takes, if you were to look at the statement of revenue, expenses, and change net position, you would be able to tie back lines 10 through 100. So that is, this funding summary takes and summarizes our income and expenses. And since it's the company-wide, it's combining all 3 main divisions and our administrative overhead amounts. And shows you net gross margin on line 35, so that is your operating expenses less your operating income less your operating expenses to give you a gross margin. Then we back out of that on lines 40 through 95, the amount of total administrative overhead to give a change in net position on line 100. That change in net position, if you were a for-profit entity, you could say net income. Since we don't have a profit motive, we don't have the money revert back to an owner or shareholders, it is a change in net position. So this lets you see on that line 100, and for each funding summary throughout the electric, water, cable, give you an idea of the financial performance. Are we setting rates appropriately to be able to cover the operating expenses of the division? And you can see here on line 100, years 1 and 2, we're hovering around that $7.1, $7.2 million number. We have a significant jump in year 20, and that continues out through 22, and most of that's due to the $5 million reduction or estimated reduction in wholesale power cost. And you will see in year 3, all things start to look better, and it's primarily due to that wholesale power.
Have you also got some SEPA? You actually show SEPA going positive at some point, don't you?
No, sir. Because there's no decision been made yet on how the SEPA will be handled and part of the portfolio, we show over on the assumptions page, on page 8, I think we have a expense, actually, a loss of $125,000 in years 1 and 2, and then we show it flat, it's showing no increase No savings and no cost, just a flat throughout years 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
Now, if, based on consultants' discussion of how SEPA could fit into the KYMEA portfolio, I think they've made projections of additional $750,000 offset to wholesale power. So that would be $750,000. That's close to that $800,000 additional ARC you talked about. So if SEPA is incorporated as it could be and estimated to be in the current KYMA portfolio, then this budget looks a lot better. So
And that would be in addition to any KEME savings that you've already built in?
yes, yes, it sure would.
Okay.
And we've been conservative on the KYMEA savings. It could be more, but we decided to take the conservative route for sure. We're basing a lot of capital spending on those savings, and so we've decided to take the conservative approach, and if things work out better, then great. But kind of under promise and over deliver when it comes to looking at how the structure from moving away from Kentucky Utilities will benefit the plant board.
And on the expense side, you're assuming, Vint, the AMI costs are in the expense projections also?
Correct. They're in the capital starting in 2019, correct? 2019 by the staff recommendations.
So the assumptions here assume KEME and we go with AMI?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at the company-wide summary, just after we get to the change in net position, and this will flow, like I mentioned, for all funding statements for electric, water, telecom, we add back our non-cash items. Depreciation is, it's amount recognizes investments made in capital infrastructure in prior years that we take a pro rata portion of as an expense. The idea is to match, the expense with the economic value produced from the assets you purchased. So that depreciation is an expense in our statement of revenue, expense, and change in net position, but it's actually not a cash expenditure. The cash expenditure was made in prior years. So we add back the depreciation amount. That's cash that we can use for other items such as debt service or capital infrastructure. On line 120, we show estimated, starting in line 115, estimated debt funding that we would need to fund large capital projects. On line 120, we're estimating $4 million that we would borrow for the water reservoir. We have an application in with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority, and we'll have news on that probably in the next 60 days, I'm guessing, to see if that's something that we might be able to participate in. On line 125, you see that the other additional borrowing, we have a FSN third lien lease with United Bank that is currently open. We have until December 31st of this year to draw down the remaining funds, which is approximately $3.2 million. We have spent of that $3.2 million, $1.5 million, but have just not drawn it down yet. So this is showing that we would draw down the 1.5 we've already spent, and then also invest the $1.7 million into the cable telecom infrastructure. Lines 135 through 170, you can see when you look at debt service, the expense portion of debt service is in the statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position. On this funding summary, these payments to debt service are the principal portions of payments. You can see on line 135, exciting that we start to see one of those electric and water revenue bonds pay off. In December 1st of 2019, we'll make our last payment there. So you can see line 135, years 4 and 5, there is no amount. That significantly contributes to what I mentioned earlier, to water having a positive cash balance in year 5 estimated. The other thing worth noting in here, line 170, we talk about taking out a new water reservoir loan. That KIA loan is estimated on line 170, that we would start making payments on that in year 2 of this budget. The other thing I'd like to point out is on line 160, the FSN first lien lease. The last payment will be made in March of 2022. So you can see in year 5, on line 160, just over $1.5 million. That would be 3/4 of payment, 3/4 that we would make, and that would be drop off the books as well. That's around $2.5 million in debt service a year. So that would be something that, as you look out to year 23 and forward, is also going to help increase our cash and our ability to invest and do other things that we'd like to do without borrowing additional money. So,
David, you mentioned, I think it's important to point out, you're building the budget on the reservoir at 4.
Yes, sir.
which is the estimate with the flat roof. So if this board later in, July, when we come back, if we adopt a roof option other than that, that would add to that bond cost.
Yes, sir. We would show increased capital spending. So say the board decided to go with the 1/16th, $500,000 more. You would see the capital infrastructure budget go up 500, and then you would see the borrowing go up 500.
And then the,
We said that a little bit backwards. This budget is based on a domed roof, not
Right.
flat.
right, that's,
Right.
okay, yeah, I'm sorry, the dome,
The dome roof.
yeah, the taller dome, the
Right.
1/10 or 1/16th. And so if we went with the flat or the 1/10, that would make that cost higher.
This is based on the 1/10, 4 million. The 1/16th is $500,000 more. If we were to go with the domed 1/16th lower profile, we would increase capital budget 500 and increase the borrowing. So we're assuming we're going to borrow for all of the actual tank cost.
And then we didn't spend any of the Tanglewood money this year, so that 860 drops to the bottom line.
Yes, sir.
And then you've got it built back in for the next fiscal year. You've built that cash back in again.
Yes, it
So the
absolutely
money
is.
from the Tanglewood that we've already voted on is in here in the proposed budget.
Yes, sir. That is in there, that 860 that we voted on during this current fiscal year. It's back in there. So it's exciting to see that, outside of year one, there's no additional debt taken out by the FPB as far as this budget is concerned. If the assumptions hold, and I have to say, I don't want to go too far out, but I could see many, many years out of we wouldn't need to borrow money. I think we would generate cash in a sufficient fashion to be able to reinvest back into our infrastructure and continue to operate without borrowing funds, unless the board saw that borrowing those funds would be, worth whatever project were to come our way. But that's something worth noting. That makes me excited because you just have so many more options. And, I know we've significantly reinvested back in the water treatment plant and a lot of things that we've needed to do to invest back in infrastructure. But to be able to see that cash balance loosen up and then our options, like I say, become to really have a lot more of ability to move within the company and do things we'd like to do without raising more capital.
So in about 4 years, life gets good.
It will definitely start to look better. The after you go through your statement of revenue, expenses, and change in net position, add back your cash, add back depreciation, show additional borrowing, show your debt payments. We get to a total cash funding for the year, additional increase. Line 180, we show the beginning estimated cash balance. Line 185, total amount of cash available for capital additions. So you can see on line 190, this is the Vision's estimated capital additions. This would be for electric, water, telecom additions. And then lines 200 through 215 are the administrative department capital additions, which is mainly, you have some small things for relatively small for administrative, IT, and our support services there. On line 225 is our end of year estimated cash reserve balance. We talk about cash reserves, we're talking about cash on hand. So this is including restricted and non-restricted funds. But you can see when you look at line 225, let me scroll up here, when you compare 225 to the very bottom of the page, line 285. Line 285 is our recommended minimum cash reserve needed. This is essentially 90 days cash on hand is what we're shooting for. And you can see that we are right at it in year one, and then our actual estimated cash is actually over what we show as a minimum recommended balance. So I think it's great to see that we are improving the financial position. As the years, we're looking to approve years 17, 18 in this budget. As you get through the years 2, 3, 4, 5, as many estimates as we have going on here, you start to lose a little data reliability, but I really think that this trend is going to continue if we follow this plan out. The lines 230 to 275 are just amounts that the plant board must keep on hand to be in accordance to our debt covenants. We have sinking funds that we must keep cash in. Those sinking funds, the banks will go in and pull that money out and send it to the bondholders when it comes to our electric and water revenue bonds. And then also all of our KIA notes have reserves we must keep as well. So that estimated minimum cash reserve is looking at the amount of the absolute minimum amount of cash we must have be 30 days cash plus all those reserve balances. So we'd like to stick to anything above that line 285 is good for us, and we are there for each of the 5 years.
David, what's your thinking beyond, I mean, the next 2 years, we're right at the recommended.
Mhm.
Then beyond that, and you start adding in the, KEMI and then possibly the add-on for SEPA. What's your thinking once we get beyond that? There's always, having been in government for a while, the taxpayers never really have a great appreciation for you holding a lot of their money
Sure.
because they'd rather have their money than you have it.
Right.
Or what are your thinking once you start reaching beyond those points? What would be your thinking? Because it won't be this board deciding, but a future board will decide. Would it be best to do rate reductions at this point, or best to be paying off bonds early and reducing interest costs and debt service payments, which in fact frees up on reoccurring revenue? I mean, what's your thinking once you get? I mean, I think it's great to say, we ought to have as big as large
Sure.
reserves. We can do that, but at some point, ratepayers, taxpayers say, "I want my money."
Absolutely.
I mean, you got it, I want it back.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, if you had it, you can pay off loans. Even though we have favorable interest rates, you still save money on interest. I mean, so what's your thinking in terms of like year 3 and out
Sure.
as just as a strategy?
We budgeted conservatively for the change in wholesale power. So I think there could be opportunities there to see more savings. So that is additional adding to that reserve balance. And then if you talked about with SEPA, same thing. We have not budgeted, I'll tell you this, the first 2 years in this budget of KYMEA savings, let's assume that we will use for the AMI, the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project. So the first 2 years of KYMEA, cash is called for in investing in that technology and reaping all the benefits that the consultants' studies show that we would. After that, there comes a point to see where we sit at that time. I'd like to, not like I say overpromise and I'd like to underpromise, overdeliver. But there comes a point when you see the trend that there could be, and it more likely would be a point where you're looking at, what should we do with this excess cash? Do you pay off debt, or can you reduce rates? Depending on what the infrastructure, I should say the interest rate environment is when we get out to that year. So we're looking at 2022 before we would really have a decision to make. So at that time, it'd be worth looking at, is interest rates, is it favorable that we would refund those bonds? Because mainly it's going to be the bonds that are still hanging out there. Refund the bonds and look to save a little interest, or give it back in the form of rate decreases. So depends on how things flush out. If our estimates are on the high end, then you could do some of those things sooner than later. But I think it is worth talking to our community, to the public, to our ratepayers, to say that I know things have been tight, that rates continue to rise, and a lot of those reasons are out of our control. But if you look forward, the financial position, the decisions made by the board, while they're not favorable, they're not fun to make, have put the plant board in a financial position where years down the road we're actually talking rate decreases. The fact we're even talking about that is great. So and as that potential for rate decreases were to come, we believe that those around us, those that we look at and kind of compare ourselves to, will continue to pull away from us, which then you talk about having rates in this community that are very favorable compared to those around us, and that economic development and the snowball that comes with that. So there's a lot of things to be hopeful for in this, and we've, like I say, taken a conservative approach. But as we move forward, that is the strategy: is how much we would want to return that back to the pockets of the ratepayers. I'm a ratepayer; I would love to have it back as well. So that is some of the positive decisions that a lot of companies like us don't have the ability to even talk about. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. I could go through and spend a lot of time walking through things, but unless the board would like to go another way, I think that we just jump right in, walking through each division, and just talk about the items that affect each division. That will include not just the operating expense, but also the capital additions, because that'll hit some of the big numbers that we need to talk about. And then we'll also get into revenue rate setting for those as well to cover each division. So I think that would cover a lot. So I think we'll just go ahead and switch over and start hitting on our electric division. They've always had the fun of getting to be the first ones out the gate. So like I talked about here, let's flip over to page 21. Page 21 is, I just walked through a funding summary company-wide. This is a funding summary for the electric division. I'm going to just shut this screen down because there's too many things to think about at one time. On page 21, this is the electric funding summary. And we talked about this during the budget work session, but since it's worth talking about again, how we set rates. Those four pieces of revenue requirements. What does it take us to operate this company on an annual basis? What type of money do we need to spend to reinvest back into our infrastructure to provide reliable service? The debt that we have issued and the debt that we look to issue, how much money is it going to take to service that debt? And then how much do we need in reserves? What amount do we need to retain in order to hit that financial position that we want? So when you add all those four pieces up together, you come to that dollar amount, and that is the dollar amount that you need to be able to cover, and you cover it by setting rates appropriately. So we do a cost of service study for electric and water. We're talking about possibly doing one in this budget for cable telecom as well. The cost of service studies they come in, consultants look at all of our different customer classes. We allocate expenses to each and come up with, you look and see what customer classes are driving the expenses. What percentage of each customer class are contributing to the expenses of the division, and then try to set rates in accordance to those allocations. So that's what we do. We've looked at what is needed in operations, what is needed in the capital investment back into the electric division. Technically, if you look at the projects that we have taking debt out for, not one of them was specifically for electric. Electric and water are statutorily combined, and those two divisions are you could say, are joined when it comes to debt service. So the first, and actually we don't talk about electric taking out any debt for any capital project in this 5 years. So looking at page 22, looking at the lines 10 and 15 are operating and other electric revenue. Total operating revenue estimated for this year is just under $67.5 million. When you back out all of our operation expenses and our administrative expenses, you get to an increase in net position on line 100 of just under $2.4 million. And that's where we hover for the first 2 years of this budget. We add back in our depreciation of just under $1.9 million. The electric division, and this is something worth talking about as well, the Electric and Revenue Bond Series 2015 is the bond that was taken out to fund this new administration building. And we allocate the debt service for that debt to the three divisions. You know, we have all three divisions are reaping the benefit of the administrative staff that are here and service each of the three. So they're very close to a third, but the electric division does have, we've allocated based on total customers, 40% of the administrative, I should say 39%, we allocate to electric, 29% water, 32% cable telecom. So when you look at line 125 on this funding summary, that is the 39% allocated amount for the principal portion of the administrative building bonds. You can see we start the year out estimating to be just over $15 million in current cash, giving us just over $19.5 in cash to invest in capital infrastructure. Looking at line 145, you can see historically, you know, in these numbers for capital additions include the vehicles, bucket trucks, things that the electric division needs. When you strip all those out, electric division has historically invested about $1.8 million a year actual spending in capital infrastructure. So if you were to take out the vehicles and take out AMI in years 4 and 5, you would see that we're hovering around that $1.8 million in a historical investment figure. You look at line 145, you can see years that we're approaching around $7 million in investment for the electric division, and that is the AMI project. We'll get to when we talk about capital spending. So overall, on line 180, you can see that we have estimated right at our minimum cash reserve, just over 17 million in year one, and that increases every year and really kicks into gear in year three. And that's what we were talking about, the strategy going forward with that increasing reserve balance. But that's a quick summary of how we look. I'd like to turn it over to Vint Foster, who's our the General Administrative Assistant General Manager of Operations for Electric and Water Division, and also our Chief Electrical Engineer, to go through the rest of this, and jump in when I need to.
All right. Thank you, David. I'm going to go over some things, and obviously Scott Hudson, the electric superintendent, is here with me, and he'll cover some of these things as well. A lot of the things with the electric budget is very similar year over year. It's a lot of the same expenses for the same kind of operational needs. If the board's fine, I'm going to cover some of the big dollar topics and kind of the way they fit into 4 strategic goals that we try to run up the system by. And then certainly if you have questions on any of those items, ask as we go through it. And then after that, if there's other items the board have questions on, I'll be happy to go back and cover those as well. This is somewhat similar to our conversation earlier in the year. A lot of the assumptions and things haven't changed greatly, so some of this will be familiar. The 4 strategic goals that the electric department tries to operate under are: provide reliable power while maintaining safe working conditions, provide competitive electric rates while maintaining sound financial practices, meet all requests for service in a friendly and timely manner, and then be environmentally responsible while maintaining competitive rates. And all the items we do, we try to fit into those 4 goals. Many of them fit into more than one goal, and that's certainly the way we like to see that. The first one I would like to bring your attention to is AMI. Now, I'm kind of covering the electric budget. I'll jump around to some different pages. Page 22 is what David was talking about, some of the funding sheet. They're also over on page 60 is some of the detailed items we will hit. And then when we talk about the capital budget, that's over on page 18. So the first major project I will kind of hit on is AMI. As you know, in May, we had the business case where we went through that and looked at all the details. The business case came back positive. We were very pleased with how the numbers worked out there. So in looking at that and the money we've been talking about, that our savings will be generated from KYMEA, staff believes the best time to start that would be in 2019. It has been put into our budget with that type of a pattern, a timeline. The consultants, if you remember, started out with a 2018 assumption. And when we saw what the costs were and different things and looking at our future monies that we had, staff believes moving it back 1 year to 2019 would ensure that we could pay for the project without having additional borrowing or raising rates to our customers. So AMI is in the capital portion of the budget. That's over on page 19. So we have it laid out in there. 2019, 2020 are kind of the beginning phases, and then the larger pieces drop in 21 and 22. We have put conservative numbers. They're a little bit more than the business case, just to make sure we cover things. But again, that was kind of laid out in accordance with the conversations we had in May on that item. Some other things that are big expenses for the electric department, kind of on the maintenance side, is tree trimming. That's our largest single contract that we have every year. Runs around $500,000 a year. We run 2+ crews depending on how things are going, and that is kind of the hard. You see our indices every year. Every month we come to you with our indices of reliability, and our reliability numbers are very good compared to national and regional averages. And a huge reason for that is our aggressive tree trimming program. We try to keep the easements as clean and keep the lines off of the trees off the power lines as much as possible. We continually work on that. We have these construction crews, and we have a person in-house, a foreman, who he has other duties, but he also manages those crews and makes sure that happens in a efficient manner. So we've spent money on that somewhere in this kind of price range for many, many years. Do you know how many years exactly?
Past 5.
that level, but I mean, even before that, we were up in the upper fours.
The past 5 years have been around the 500,
Right.
550 mark.
But as long as Scott can remember in our careers, we've spent considerable amount of money. Well, I'll take that back. At the beginning of our careers, we didn't spend a lot of money on tree trimming, and our reliability really suffered. But
And
that
our
changed.
overtime- And our overtime. rate.
Overtime was really high back then. So anyway, that's changed, and the tree trimming now is something that I think we've proven to be very valuable. It's a key element of our reliability. And so, again, we show that in our budget in the that would be expense back on page 60. About halfway down the page, electric distribution overhead lines, the vegetation. There's 575 put in the budget for those each year. Again, those are obviously estimated as we go through, but we've been able to do it with that kind of number year over year. That particular item was rebid this year, and at the next board meeting, we'll have the recommendations for the new contracts for the upcoming year. The tree trimming comes forward on page 22 under line item 75, overhead lines, $775,000, and of that, 575 is the tree trimming budget. So again, that's the single biggest contract we have like that. You'll notice in our capital budget again, the capital's back on page 18. As you look through the years, you'll see quite a few projects relating to substations. They are transformer replacements, breaker replacements, items like that. We've mentioned before, back in the mid-70s, we changed the transmission system from 34.5 kV to 69 kV, and when we did that, it necessitated replacing many of the transformers in our substations. And so they're not as many as they used to be, but we still have a lot of equipment from that vintage. And as you can imagine, that was all going to come to the end of its service life at the same time. Big expense to replace it all. So we've kind of started to replace those. Well, we've been a number of years down the road of replacing those things, but we've staggered them in now. So the next generation, when it rolls around, they will actually have staggered items that need to be replaced. They won't all be coming due at the same time. So we think that's going to pay dividends for future generations as well. But you will see quite a few of those items continuing to replace those every couple of years. There's numerous breakers, transformers, and stuff in there, and we can talk about those if you need to, but they're fairly self-explanatory. Another item that we have spent money on for about 30 years now is voltage conversion. We have changed over most of our distribution lines from a lower voltage. They were 2400, then they were 8,320 volts, and we've slowly moved almost all the lines now up to 13,800 volts. And the advantages of that are a lower loss rate, improved efficiencies in your system. For instance, the average municipal loss rate of our size and system would be about 4.9%. We have a loss rate currently of about 3%. So the savings each year from that efficiency gain is $403,000 a year. So just even that savings alone nearly covers your cost for your tree trimming. So that's something we continue to do. The only areas that really need to be converted now are kind of in the downtown, older part of town, the bowl area. And so those things, we'll be working on that. Those are laid out in the capital areas as we replace some transformers and do some of the reconductor jobs in those areas to make those things happen. Another item of note that you'll see is in our engineering expense. Let's see if I can find it here. That would be on page 22, line 125. Our engineering expense, we are in the process of taking our GIS mapping from kind of an infant stage where we had a lot of data in there, but we didn't have good connectivity, we didn't have good modeling, and it very much limited our ability to put applications in the field for our folks. So we've been working to update that and correct that. It's gone a little slower than we thought at times. We've had some personnel be out for various reasons that were directly involved, and that slowed that down somewhat. And you see in previous years we had higher budgets and we only spent about $34,000 this year on that, and the next year it jumps back up. And again, the idea is that we would continue that project and try to get those things implemented. The GIS mapping is a key element in future outage management systems, dovetailing with AMI, doing those things. So there's a lot of promise there, a lot of advantages, not only to the engineering department, the way we do those work orders, but then getting those applications in the field on tablets and things to folks that will help the field crews be more efficient and provide better service as well. Another item I do want to bring to your attention is the KYMEA consulting cost. In 2014 and 2015, the plant board had hired the consultants, the individual utilities had hired the consultants to do the work. And as we created KYMEA, then those consultants began to work for KYMEA and no longer for the Frankfort plant board. So the cost no longer came directly to Frankfort, they came to KYMEA, and KYMEA provided assessments to its members to pay for the startup cost of KYMEA. So this year, those have moved. If you look on page 60, near the top, you'll see the KYMEA expense. In our previous years, we had kind of put it in consulting fees. And originally, as I was saying, that's how it did land, but now it is a part of our power supply cost. It's a direct expense from KYMEA. After 2019, when we are buying our power from KYMEA, there'll be staff people associated with KYMEA, and any consulting that they have, they certainly won't have the consulting on the level they have had in the startup phase. Any of those kind of things they will be part of your power supply cost, just like they currently are from KU. They have consultants, they have staff. Those things are rolled into your power supply cost, and that's the way those things will be recovered after 2019.
So, Vent, what does that total number look like for KYMEA?
David, do you have the graph? Yeah, we have a graph for
Not just our share, but everybody in.
I don't know off the top of my head. I will get that for you for the total, everyone in. Frankfort's total was, what was it, 3.5? 3.3 or 3.4 million is what we've paid so far. That's a consulting group of at times it's been about 10 different firms. That also includes fees for things like transmission studies. Those come in at a pretty high price. A lot of things like that had to be done. Those include those kind of costs. So I think that it's a lot of money to spend on consultants. I know everybody thinks, you got to be kidding me. You're spending $3 million on consultants. But I think you have to think of the complexity and the specialization that this particular issue is. And you have to understand the fact that you're going to pay for the consultant cost within just a few months with the savings from KYMEA. That's an extremely good rate of return. But anyway, in the coming budget, I'll find out for you what the total.
Can we also get an itemized list of how that money's getting spent?
Yes, sir. We have all that laid out, and we'll get that for you.
So is it your understanding, Vin, from your understanding, when will be the first time they will actually KEME will hire employees as opposed to using consultants? When do you think the first time a human being will show up who will actually be in charge?
Directly in charge of KYME. We have retained the services of a search firm to search for a CEO for KYMEA. We currently have done that, just started it. We expect, optimistic would be later this year, probably early next year, that we would have that person in place. So that would be your CEO. And from there, I think the total estimate was maybe 4 employees, including a CFO, maybe a part-time attorney, and some technical trading individuals. I can't remember exactly what their titles were. But it would be about 4 people as a total staff. And again, the first one would be in early 2018 probably, and the others, the CEO then would be charged with moving forward with some of those hires after that, and they might happen in probably late 18 would be my guess, or early 19.
So does that 4 FTE cover the administrative resources they've outsourced to Paducah?
Yes.
So then those would come out of Paducah
That is
into the
correct.
employee? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the person right now it's Kempa, Paducah and Princeton together. The person that does some of the financial stuff for them is actually doing some of the work for KYMEA on a part-time basis. So we have some there kind of working, but it's not a full-on staff person like you would, I think, what you were asking.
What was the thought around outsourcing that versus just pulling it into one of the members? I mean, even if we provided that service for free, it seems like that'd be a better deal, right?
It might be a better deal. I think I think what we ran into with a lot of people are most of the staffs just didn't have the expertise of power supply financial experience, and just the workload that it would put onto an employee. In almost all cases, they're a full-time employee already with a full position. The person that's doing it from Kempa is the CFO of Kempa, but they're actually involved in power supply transactions on a routine basis. They understand that world and that bits and pieces. And again, since we shared a little bit of cost there, the cost to KYMEA was very small compared to trying to go out and find somebody. We wanted to get a CEO first and then let them be involved in those hiring decisions of their full-time CFO and other staff. So in the budget, you'll see the KYMEA consulting costs for 18 and 19, and then it zeroes out there because, again, like I was discussing, it goes into your power supply costs, but we also, as you get your CEO and those full-time employees on, you no longer are relying on consultants to do some of that work. It's a difficult situation to, I don't know how many times we've started organizations from scratch, but it becomes the chicken and an egg thing. You would love to have a staff and a CEO, and they do everything for you, but you kind of have to get the organization going to be able to pay the CEO to kind of get those things. And so we're at that point where we're starting to be able to transition over. I think everybody's looking forward to that. We think that's definitely the way to go. So, but that is some of the KYMEA costs. One thing I would like to bring to your attention is a mistake, but it's a good mistake. On page 22, under consulting, line 175, in the 17-18 budget, we had $231,000. That should be $31,000. And the year after that was $326,000, and it should be $26,000. The mistake, we went back and forth when we started to put this budget together, and the AMI staff came back about where some of the consulting, or not consulting, but the RFP creation and some of those early pieces of AMI where they should hit, whether it was over in expense or in capital. So we inadvertently left those in from an early discussion, so they come out. Those services are included in the capital portion where I brought out the line item on AMI. So that will actually improve the budget by $500,000 over those 2 years.
Drops to the bottom line then?
Yes, absolutely. So that's sorry about that mistake, but it is a positive mistake for the bottom line.
You didn't let David spend it anywhere else, did you?
We have not. We have not. Anyway, I'll be happy to go over any of the items in capital on a line-by-line basis. This is very, very similar to what you saw earlier in the year. If you want me to go line by line, I can. I don't know that would be as productive. Again, a lot of them are reconductors, voltage conversions, doing things like that. Again, we just don't really have anything that much out of the ordinary short of what I told you. Is there any specific questions I can help you with, or?
You plan on updating anything that's similar to you did on the East Main substation?
The East Main substation was one of our voltage conversions. We had a fire there a few years before and had to do some extensive remodeling work, and we tied that in with the voltage conversion. We do expect in 2018, 19, and 20 that we will be doing that voltage conversion in the downtown area. Along with that, it definitely will require at least one transformer change out in the substation from the older voltage to the newer voltage. And those things are included in year 21, $500,000 for that transformer replacement, $550,000. So there will be some. They won't be as extensive and as large as that substation was. That was one of our largest.
$1.5 million, right?
Do what, sir?
That one was $1.5 million.
I believe that's correct. That was a complete rebuild of everything. In this case, it's primarily just taking a transformer out and putting a new one in. Those are big transformers. They're $500,000, but we don't have all the infrastructure that was needed at the East Main situation. And again, those go back to the voltage conversions, the benefits we see from that. But once we get that done in this 5-year plan that you see, the voltage conversions will be done. You can imagine from a efficiency of stock, we no longer have to keep transformers for 2 different voltages. A lot of equipment like that goes away. Now you're just stocking one particular type of distribution voltage. We still have different transmission voltage, but our distribution voltage. So we're looking forward to that. I know Stockroom is looking forward not to have to keep as many of those pieces and parts online. And so that's been a 30-year goal. We just kind of get to be here when it rolls around, but it was good forethought years ago by the folks who started to do that.
2 questions, Ben.
Yes, sir.
One, is there anything that you see that is likely to happen the next 12 months that you have that is not in here, and for whatever reason, budgetary concerns, whatever, is not in here, something that is likely to pop up that you have not included in here?
No, not that I'm aware of. Again, we quite a bit of experience of running the system. We take a lot of our budget planning is usually very conservative. We certainly take that approach to how we build and maintain the system. Our substations have spare capacity built into them to deal with most any contingency that we would come up with. So I don't know of anything that this wouldn't take care of. There are always outliers. You could always have a tornado that wipe out a large section of your system. But again, with the reserves we're building, with the extra capacity we have in other areas, we could recover as well as any utility could from something like that.
And flipping the other side, if we came to you and said, find us $500,000, what would you let go of?
If you said find $500,000 for this year, I would push some of the reconductor projects back a year.
And we talked about this about the tree trimming once. If you push those back a year, what does that gain you?
It gains you a lot more outages.
It gains you outages, plus it gains you're gonna fall behind, so then, we're not, I'm not gonna say we're keeping up with trees now, because trees are, the way the weather has been the last several years, you get a lot of rain, you get a lot of humidity, and trees are growing 5-6 foot a year from what we trimmed before. So if you were to skip a year, you're gonna get yourself in the spot where we're not trimming the areas we need to trim, we're just jumping around trimming hot spots. And when I say a hot spot, there may be one tree here in this neighborhood, there'd be a hot spot over here, and our crews would just be particularly just running around doing those instead of taking an area, trimming the whole entire area at one time. So
a lot of your savings from the contract of that would get eaten up in additional overtime for additional outages. For when Scott and I started our careers here, we've joked many times, it's the wind would blow and you would work for nearly 3 days.
yeah.
If you had a serious wind, you would work for 3 days restoring all the power outage issues all over the place. Now
Yeah.
that was many years ago. You have a storm. We had a storm last night. You have small issues here and there, but you don't see that kind of widespread stuff on a normal storm. Certainly an ice storm or a unique event can wreak havoc on anyone, but you wouldn't save the money from reducing your tree trimming budget. Something like a project, you can defer projects. Reconductors, you could defer your voltage conversions. You could do those kind of things if you needed to, but there truly are deferments because as you push them off, those items continue to age and deteriorate.
That expense isn't going to go away.
No, sir, it's not. I wish we could. Some people talk about trucks that way. Well, you could push a truck out and later, and you can do that, but you eventually get to the point when the ice storm hits and you need every single piece of equipment you have, and half of them are breaking down. The customer doesn't like to hear, I can't get your power on because my truck's broken down. That usually doesn't fly real well. So everything we're doing here, I would have to say almost everything I can think of that we're doing is you have to do it or you're just deferring it. It'll bite you later if you don't.
Fent State, as we all know, tends to demolish a lot of its infrastructure, tower, convention center possibly, and others. Is that going to have any significant impact or consideration upon our equipment or our needs as buildings come down and something goes back? Has there been any thought about that?
Yeah, with the tower coming down, most of the utility infrastructure associated within that complex were owned and operated by the state. So that's a key point to bring out. I think I've heard some conversations about, the plant board facilities, and there were problems, but they weren't the plant board facilities. The state owned those facilities there. As they come down, the facilities we use to feed those are more on the periphery, and they'll still be there. Their facilities will get taken out. If the YMCA or some of the other buildings stay, we have feeds that currently feed them, or we'll make minor modifications to continue a feed to some of the periphery items, but it won't create a problem. When the new facilities go in, if they do new state office buildings, will certainly, the capacities there in the existing infrastructure around it and the substations, that we'll have to build some new conductors to some new service locations, but I don't expect that we would need to build any substations or do any large expenditures like that, by the way their current plans are, which is, I think, somewhat of a mirror of the transportation building, that kind of size.
So what's the impact to our load during that period of time when there's no structure there?
Well, right now, that structure is mostly vacant. You've got a few businesses in the fountain shops, but largely from a load size, it's vacant. Those state offices kind of moved to other areas, so the load has kind of stayed in our system but shifted to other areas. When they fill that building, I don't think the state's planning on hiring a lot more people. They'll come back. Now, you would think new structures will be more efficient than some of the things they're currently in, so you could see maybe a small reduction, but I don't think it will affect our load to any great degree.
Is that the same thing true with water, wouldn't it? The same would be true with water, right?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know. Again, kind of same number of people. They kind of need the same baseline of water, and your facilities are a little more efficient, maybe, but that's small compared to the overall load, especially of a building that size.
I had 3 questions. When you said by going to higher voltage, then you have less line loss, where does it go? It just is, you can't account for where it went?
No, if you have higher voltage, they're kind of an inverse relationship. As voltage goes up, your current goes down, and your current flowing in the lines, the more current you put in the line, the more or less lost in heat. It's kind of the analogy of shoving more water through a water pipe. The smaller water pipe you are, the harder it is to shove the same amount of volume of water through it. You have to have more pressure. So as you raise the voltage, you reduce the amount of current you have, and the conductors you can put in smaller conductors. We kind of have standard conductor sizes, so that really doesn't change anything for us. But you have less losses across the whole system due to heat, due to those kind of things. So that's really where your efficiencies come from. You're able to push your power from one area to the actual transformer at the house with very little loss, as opposed to lower and lower voltages. That's why we don't push the distribution system around at 120 or 240 volts, which is what you use in your house. If we pushed it all at that, the losses would be so great that it wouldn't be efficient. But you bring it up to a higher voltage, you can push it around at 13.8, which is what our primary distribution voltage is. Again, more efficient than a lower voltage, but if you were trying to go 50 or 60 miles down the road, you really need to step up to a transmission voltage, which you can push it further, have less losses. Our transmission system is 69 kV, but it's mainly around Frankfort. KU and the continued transmission system that we'll use under KYMEA is 138 kV and even higher than that in some areas. So as you push power over longer and longer distances, you raise the voltage, your current gets extremely low, and you have less losses, much more efficient. That was why back in the day when electricity was coming out, there was Westinghouse and Tesla were constantly arguing over who had the best, and or not Westinghouse and Edison. Edison wanted DC, which you don't have the inverse relationship there, and had a lot more losses. And Westinghouse was and Tesla were pushing AC, which gives you that relationship I was speaking to. And for that efficiency reason, they primarily won out.
Okay, and then I was looking at page 27. We're looking at electric, the total budget for 16, 17, and then the actual result, that there's quite a bit of difference there, if I'm reading it correctly. When you look at line 60 versus line 60 in the actual.
You're on page 27.
Yep.
Which 60?
Column for electric. So the bottom line, line 60, compared estimated versus actual.
Yeah, these are, when you look at what you're talking about the allocated portion of administrative expenses to electric.
Oh, so it's just administrative.
Yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. We had estimated budgeting of 3.8 million, and the allocated portion is 3.5. So it's a difference of $300,000, and we can, as we go through the administrative sections, you can see it's just a matter of a lot of it. You know, we had you look at payroll, we had positions that were in and out, reduction in payroll and other expenses. So it's just a combination of all the administrative operating expenses being lower than budgeted.
I see. Okay. So, in looking forward to the 17-18 budget, then you think that that's a good representation based on the difference between the two of actual and estimated?
Yes, ma'am, we think so. We've got in there, for administration, most significant, or for most departments, is payroll. And, you know, we've got everyone, based on, the, like I said, the compensation structure, what we feel are positions that need to be brought in. We've got those booked, and we think we've accounted for everything appropriately, so.
Okay. But isn't it 3.8 million versus under 3 million? Are those the two numbers to compare?
So you're looking on page 22 on the
No,
line
page
305?
27. So maybe it's just,
This is showing on page 27 for each fiscal year. So yeah, the first two boxes. The first one is 16-17 budget. The second box is 16-17 actual. And you can see, you kind of have to flip between lines. Like, for example, if you looked at general between the two boxes, you can see it was budgeted at 397, the general portion coming in at a different amount. I'd be glad to I can give you more in-depth differences if you would like that, to see the and we can walk through as we go through each administrative department as well. You can look at budget to actual, because this is just an allocation of the whole. So as a whole, we're down between what we actually had and what we budgeted. So things do happen throughout the year that you do your best to try to predict, but that's while I have that good actual versus budget estimate notation there at the front, that we do our best to try to be conservative. If you look at most of our numbers year over year, revenue, we're hitting on it pretty steady, and then there's things throughout the year that occur that change what you think will happen. So good news is we're not over budget. So.
well, right, yep, it looked like it was under, so I was hoping that you could say, well, we could look at AMI earlier then, if there's extra money in the budget.
I know that's something that we would talk about, and I think the difference between staff's recommendation of starting in calendar November 1st of 18 versus November 1st of 19 is we were pushing back the spending, so you were about $2.5 million difference between the 2 years. I think we were looking to be conservative and have those savings coming in at about the time that we get the savings. Actually, we'd see the savings a little before we would start to spend the money, but you could move it up and go ahead and get started. But I think our thought was there's a lot of estimating going on, is to let and see that those savings from KYMEA materialize, start to see those savings come in the form of lower utility bills that we would pay out, and then have that cash in our hand before we start making, the last 4 and 5 are around, $5 million outlays in those years. So that's, about writing checks your body can't cash kind of thing. We wanted to make sure we had the cash before we started writing checks. But you could move it up, and I think we would still be able to do that. So if the board chose they wanted to go with the January 1/18 timeline, that would just be a decision you all can tell us you'd rather start sooner than later. I think the timeline shows that we would start the procurement process, start looking to see what type of materials or what type of equipment we're going to put out and getting those RFPs out. So we have budgeted, I think, $400,000 for the first year, and so it's just the board's pleasure, but that was our thought of waiting to have the savings come in before we start.
Okay.
So with the actual, outside the savings from KYMEA, with the actual efficiencies that we gain from AMI, do we have some sense of how much money we're leaving on the table for not realizing those efficiencies?
I don't have an exact number of the difference between the two. I do think that you can move it up, and I would not, I'd be able to sleep at night. So I think that we could move that up and still carry forward. The main thing, as long as the big deal is that we feel comfortable that there are savings to be had with a switch to a new power supply. And if the board and everyone's on the same page that those savings will be realized, that I think with the reserves we have, there's an opportunity that we could move it up. The conservative approach would be to wait until 19, but like I say, I think I would not jump up and down if we decided to start in 18.
Can we have that number for what those efficiencies would be for tomorrow's meeting?
Yes, we can get those. The most of the efficiency is the reduction in staff for the meter reading department. So most of that, we phase out start to whittle down in year 4, and then you completely phased out our meter reading in year 5. So most of the savings wouldn't occur until later into the project, but we can have some numbers for you.
Okay, great. And one more question, Vint. The city's project to transfer the street lights from the HPS to the LEDs, where is that, and how does that impact the budget?
They moved forward, or they applied for the grant for I think it was only for a portion of the street lights. It was the 400-watt lights. I don't know if they've been awarded the grant. I was unaware of it. So they haven't moved forward with anything because they were not awarded the grant. Again, the plant board is, as we replace street lights in the system, we replace them now with our LED lights. So it is getting done. The program we were talking with the city, I don't remember the exact time frame, but it was within a fairly short time that those would be changed over. If we're doing it as a maintenance type issue when those things need to be replaced or we have issues, that certainly was spread out over many more years, 10 plus years, I believe. So right now, we have not moved forward with it. It's not in the budget. The city hasn't, again, it's my understanding they have not received the grant or the funds, so they haven't asked us to move forward with it at this point.
If they get the projects, is it basically a net?
Yes.
We'd spend more and we'd be reimbursed under the grant?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So from a budget standpoint, it's a wash?
It would, yeah, the way we had it set up is a contractor would come in and do it, because trying to get it done that fast, we would basically take all of our crews and we couldn't do the job they're actually primary to do. So it really doesn't change anything from that standpoint. If we were trying to do the labor ourselves and that suddenly came in, we couldn't do a lot of these capital projects, but that's not the plan. So it would be it would be neutral.
Vint, when the handoff comes from KU to CUMI in May of 2019, I think, it's going to be a double payment, so to speak, as I understand it. We have to pay KU and we have to make a payment to KYMEA. We've got part of that allocated or reserved, but some of that money in reserve now to take care of that. But I guess, David, in this budgeting, is that provided for?
We expect, like if you were looking at today, around a $9 million payment that would need to come, like you talked about, due to payment terms. In cash-wise, it would be 13 payments we'll make in a 12-month period, but it will be 12 months of expenses. So, that you got me a good one there. I don't think you see that the difference between the 2.8 we have and the estimated $4.5 million that would be the other payment. So we have about $1.5 million that we would need to show there. On the books, it is accounted for because we show the 12 months of payments. Cash flow wise, the total cash is representative of what we think it will be. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Because basically with CUMI, you basically have, roughly that first year, you have basically 11-month year, wouldn't you?
It's going to start.
It starts not on a fiscal year per se, but I mean, you're going to start getting power from them, but you don't pay them on day one either.
Correct.
So you got KU payment, you got tail on KU, and then you'll have a backloaded tail on KU.
But the tail on KYME is 15, KYME is 15 days. The tail on KU is almost,
45.
no, 45, yeah, it's over a
45.
month. And that's where you run into it.
It's 30-day difference on the
Yes, sir.
tail.
I think we'll have a special meeting tonight at 5 o'clock to talk about the rate increase that we're asking for is a pass-through of Kentucky Utilities. Rate increase to us, it is around $3.4 million. That's a substantial amount for us to absorb and would put us below a comfortable level of reserves. So that is what the rate setting change for electric this year is due to the Kentucky Utility increase. And you've got that in that budget, in this budget for years 1 and 2 is an assumed KU increase. In year 2 also, and then the switch to KYMEA with the reduction that we are estimating in there. So, be glad to, anything else with electric? If we don't have any questions, I think we can move on to the water division. We've got water treatment, we have water distribution. We kind of, in a way, will compartmentalize between the two, looking at what does it cost to treat water, and then the other side of the cost that we have to distribute the water to your home or business. So starting on page 23 is our water funding summary. I'm showing here right now on the screen, you can see this since 2003, this is giving our amount of water that we've sold and the number of customers. We talk about that downward trend that we see in water, that we think could be a lot of it to conservation efforts, and also the fact that sewer is linked to your water usage, kind of driving some of that. But so look at page 23. I'll just give you a brief summary again. I'll do this for each division just to kind of show where we look at as a whole, and then we can go into it with each of the department division supervisors. Lines 10 and 15, we have total revenue from usage and other fees of just over $11.6 million. As I showed back on page 8, you're looking at usage, what do you think it's going to be? We do look at past trends and see it, and try to look at establishing a usage number that we feel will hold. We're estimating to sell just over 2.2 billion gallons of water for the year. That's represented in this chart as well. So we look at the amount of usage, what rates do we need based on that usage to cover all those 4 parts of the revenue requirements. Looking at lines 25, 30, all the way down through our administrative overhead, you can see on line 100, change in net position or revenue minus our expenses of just over $1.8 million per year. So that's important to talk about. We talk about water, and we've talked about cash reserve always being tight, but you can see here that we're setting rates appropriately to be able to cover the expenses and also have additional increase in net position to be able to cover debt service and have money to contribute to infrastructure spending as well. So you can see on line 100, we estimate our revenue over expenses of just over $1.8 million in year 1, and you can see that number increase gradually over time. So we're setting rates appropriately to be able to help have that increase in net position, and those dollar amounts will help us to offset and pay debt service and capital infrastructure investment. On line 110, we add back our depreciation. You can see it's $1.6 million in year 1. You can see that number jump and then hold steady in years 2 through 5, and that is due to that, we're adding another $4 million infrastructure with the reservoir and the admin building that we will capitalize as well. Now that we're in that, you'll see that be capitalized and depreciated starting this fiscal year. On lines 130 through 155, this is the principal payments on our debt service for the water division. As we pointed out earlier, looking at the company-wide funding summary, you can see in years 3 and 4 that we have paid off the Series 2009 bonds with the interest that we have added to that. You're looking at north of $1.2 million in savings that will, or cash that we will not have to pay out in those 2 years, which really helps the reserve balance. You can see on line 165, this is where we think we'll begin each year with our cash balances. So you can see that we have a negative amounts trending there. The line 175, the amount of infrastructure investment. You can see year one, the 6.2 million. Most of that is for the water reservoir. We have general spending kind of patterns in years 2 through 4, and then there is a valve project out at the water treatment plant in year 5 that brings that back up to 3 million. You can see our administrative department spending, and you can see line 210 is the estimated cash reserves for water, that we are on a trend downward and hit to a positive balance in year 5. Hopefully our estimates are conservative and we'll be better than that, but we are moving in the right position. I've, like I say, been here 5 years and have never seen a black number in that line, so I feel like we're moving in the right way. I'd be glad to cover anything else at a high level, but if there are no questions, we can jump right into
You're not
treatment.
showing any debt service payments in the 17-18 budget for the reservoir?
No, sir. The thought there is with the project timing, based on when decisions are made and we get work moving, that we would be during the construction phase during this fiscal year coming up, 17-18.
Okay.
And that it would coincide close to the end of the fiscal year, we would be done with the project and start servicing debt.
Okay.
First debt payment in 17-18.
Okay.
Take that back.
In
18-19. So the KIA notes the way they're structured on a construction drawdown basis, so we draw it down as needed. We will submit invoices for the project to KIA and receive funding withdrawals that we would use as we go. So we'll just draw it down as we need it. I think I'm assuming in here around $1 million a quarter. It could be a much more condensed drawdown, but for our purposes, it's close enough.
Is it your understanding from the availability, do you feel pretty good about the availability of the KIA money?
I know that they rank the projects. David's more involved and has a better idea of how these things are graded, but I know that we have a good possibility. I mean, it's no hard to, it's not, definitely not a debate whether it's a needed project. So, David, anything to add?
I have a good feeling, but it's too early to tell.
Right. But do you have a good feeling that it could go, that there would be more than 4 million if we had to go higher?
There's a cap of 4 million.
Okay, 4 million is the most you could get. So anything above 4, we'd have to either fund a separate note or cash fund.
Or request it from them, but there's typically a cap at 4 million on KIA loan.
Okay.
It's not to say that it can't go over that we have in the past,
Mhm.
but it's typically a 4 million cap.
Okay.
So I would probably, if that were to occur, we can cross that when we get there, but we'd probably recommend moving out of cash reserves just to avoid any future borrowing when we have the funds, so. We have electric funds, I should say. But I don't know who wants to go first. Julie, you want to, or Dallin?
I think David, you want to do that?
David Denton took all of our good talking points away. It's really a bare bones budget, with the exception of the reservoir. A couple of new things. We significantly reduced our AC and line replacement. I think we looked at a 5-year rolling average and dialed that back, so we're doing a better job of budgeting. There's a new item in there to cover a city-required paving permit. We're estimating at $250,000 a year going forward on the paving expenses. And as it was mentioned earlier, the only thing that we have budgeted for is the most economical 1/10 dome $4 million reservoir.
On the paving, who was affected by that? Us and Columbia Gas?
Primarily the underground people, us, Columbia Gas, sewer department,
Mm-hmm.
typically electric overhead.
Yeah, electric and cable would be minor compared to what water. They're by far the largest of our stations that would be hit by that.
Jumping over to page 24 on detailing some of the projected revenue. Did want to point out in line 20 in wholesale customers that we are assuming a reduction in consumption in the wholesale class as utilities to the west of us continue their expansion into some of the territories that have historically been ours. And line 45, the additional revenue required, that is how we will show, have shown and will continue to show forward our annual incremental rate increases going forward. That's how that hits the budget.
Can I ask you a question, David?
Yes, sir.
and we talked about, I think there's always been a lot of confusion when it comes up in meetings, and I think unfortunately some customers may be under the misconception or misimpression that because we sell wholesale that costs them more money, when in fact, I think you estimated it probably what buys down our regular customer rates by what, 12 to 14%?
Probably so. The best way that I would suggest people to consider that, our wholesale customers help us pay the bills.
Right. So if we didn't have them, our regular customers here in town would pay higher water bills.
That's absolutely correct.
So my question to you is we get drained on some of our wholesale, do we have any options? I mean, obviously, we can make a water. Is there any options that we have to compete to hold those customers in any type of strategy that you can think of?
We have to do that with our rates
Okay,
to stay competitive. And we've been doing that. We've taken on some new wholesale customers, and we've negotiated new water supply contract, increasing water sales with those people. We continue to look for opportunities, but outside of that, we have to have our rates competitive.
Right.
Because we are in a competitive situation with respect to wholesale water.
so I mean, my question is then, do you have any magic in terms of what would our rates have to be more competitive to win more customers? Wholesale.
It's a little bit more complicated than that because we have, like the electric has power purchase agreements.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a water supply contract.
Right.
So you have to look at each one of those individually. About the only thing that I can tell you for certain is we won't have to keep our rates competitive.
Mm-hmm. Are the rates we're looking at here and running out this 5-year model, do you think that does that? Are we still competitive through this model?
We're as competitive as we can be based on our last cost of service study. I don't see in the foreseeable future us raising the wholesale rate much more than we've already planned to do in our cost of service study that we did in 2013. We are we're going into the last ratchet of that rate increase in October of this year. I don't see us changing that rate for a period of time.
And is that rate, in your opinion, competitive with who we're trying to hold
Yes.
as our wholesale customers?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And as a result of that, our wholesale customers are helping paying the bills of all.
Right.
The water department, we have a high fixed to variable cost ratio. We're about 90% fixed cost and 10% variable. So, any water that we can sell anywhere helps keep the rates lower to everybody. That answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Do distilleries actually buy very much water, or are they processing their own water from wells or something?
They're a good water customer.
Okay,
I can't talk with any specifics
that's
about
fine.
how much, but they help pay the bills too.
Okay,
And I know there's been several testimonies at times when we've had discussions on the reservoir about people have come in and said, what if we got a new distillery or a couple more distilleries? And I think based on a conversation you had once in a parking lot, that you said even if we got a brand new distillery and they were in the range of what our current distilleries run, with the new reservoir in it, we'd have more than enough capacity to handle that.
A new distillery, which we'd love to have,
Right.
is not going to necessitate that second tank being built immediately.
Okay.
That's just, we've looked at the numbers, we've looked at the system, and it's just not there, it's not true.
Okay. Thank you.
and I don't think we've gotten to talking about the water treatment plant yet, but if that's running at 50% capacity, is that accurate?
On an average day, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything we can do to economize there so that it's more efficient than running at 50%?
Well, that's a function of what your customer needs are, so we would have to expand the demands of the system, and we can't make people drink more water.
Right.
So then we have to expand our territory, and those are political subdivisions.
Okay. Well, looking at the other end, the cost of running it, can we reduce the cost of running the water treatment plant in any way?
Pretty bare bones already.
Yeah, that's what I kind of assumed, but I thought I'd ask.
I think one of the things you have to keep in mind, if there were more customers, they're running at 50%, but that doesn't mean 50% capacity, but it doesn't mean, all the motors and all the stuff aren't running at 100% and we're getting 50% capacity. They're variable frequency drives, the motors are variable speed, everything is, you
Okay.
run one pump rather than three, so it can scale itself up and scale itself back. The
Mhm.
physical plant in the ground can handle,
Much more.
quite a bit more capacity, but it doesn't mean that we're 50, it doesn't mean 50% inefficient.
Inefficient. Okay, good.
Yeah,
point.
we're running at 50% capacity.
Yes.
So
The
it
the
means
biggest,
it's
of course, the biggest energy users are the pumps, and we did an energy assessment several years ago. We have it in the budget to do it again. We got a good report card on all of our larger pumps, so we feel very confident that, those pump selections were correct, and we're pumping water in a good, efficient manner.
Okay.
And I think, I guess, Ralph, you and I were talking one day. I think one of the things important is I'm not just anyway saying anything negative about the work the Kentucky River Authority does. But every time we take a gallon out of the Kentucky River, we pay a fee.
Yes, we do.
And when Louisville Water takes a gallon out of Ohio, they don't pay anything.
Very true.
How similar is it to wastewater treatment? I mean, are there gases that can be combusted or solids that can be combusted to offset some of those energy? There's not, you just don't have that with the fresh water.
There's no decomposition of
No,
organic
no.
material. So.
There's really, we don't produce anything other than the finished product.
So Kathy just needs to run the campaign, wash your car more often?
Or expand our territory.
Or expand our
Which is kind of difficult to do.
Yeah.
Well, staff came up with proposed stickers that we would distribute throughout the community that says, please flush twice.
Please let us know.
You have anything you want to add, Julie?
Not really. For my operations side of things, my O&M costs, they've been based on a 5-year running average. I feel like that picks up wet year, dry year, so that's going to reflect in the electric demand and in the treatment cost demand for chemicals. On the capital budget side of things, I went back. I know there's a lot of talk about it's a brand new water plant. Well, it's about a 75% brand new water plant. I have a lot of valves and piping and such in the ground that is still original to this plant from 1972. And so my capital budget is on page 20. It's pretty extensive, but it basically covers those valves and all of that piping that is in need of replacement. Things that are very critical that if it goes down, will shut the plant down. Some of the other projects that I'm looking at are on the chemical feed side of things, just to improve the safety of some of those chemical feed processes, makes it better for staff and just safer for the environment and the surrounding areas. Other than that, it's like David said, it's pretty much bare bones.
There's a brochure on water that came out recently that said sometimes we have too many CFLs, so too much chlorine left in the water. That water brochure that was mailed out maybe this past week.
Oh, the Consumer Confidence Report.
Yes.
Oh, CFLs, THMs, maybe, is that what?
I thought it started with a C. I forgot to bring the brochure with me, but I can bring it tomorrow.
Okay.
But there was a little asterisk that said sometimes we're out of range on this one, but we're really close.
I don't remember us being out of range on anything.
Okay.
So if you'll bring it,
I will.
and I'll look at mine. I haven't gotten mine in the mail yet, but
Oh,
I do
okay.
have a copy on the desk. We are required by law by July 1st of every year to provide that information to our customers. If it is a test that we don't do every year, we have to include the last 5 years' worth of data. So one of those data points may have occurred 5 years ago, and in that time, we don't want to be out of compliance. It means we have to do public notification, get a lot of questions, makes me very nervous. And so we've put a lot of effort into the last 2.5, 3 years of really fine-tuning everything we do on that one. So.
The only thing I had in distribution was that we did significantly reduce the AC and galvanized program, and David had looked at a 5-year running average, and it was much lower than what was originally budgeted. And so we thought, since there was gonna be rate increases, we wanted the budget to be closer on our actual expenses as far as we didn't want anything inflated. And so we did cut that money. And then the meter replacement program, and we're gonna continue forward with that and try to prepare for the AMI program. There's about 7,000 meters that we're gonna try to replace before the AMI program takes into effect, so that they're AMI ready when the program takes in, and that's about a little over $300,000.
And you're reading from the bottom of page 19 on line about 595. 595 and 600.
Yes, the meter replacement's $595, and AC and galvanized $600. That was approximately $800,000 for the AC and galvanized. We cut that down to $408.
Now, will we be doing that with our own crews?
Yes,
So the only thing we're having to contract out, I know we contract out the tree trimming, and if we get the Frankfort gets the grant on the streetlights, that'd be a contract out. But everything else we're doing with our own staff?
that's correct. The only thing that would be contracted would be the paving.
Okay.
That'll actually be a payment to the city. Normally, our own crews did that, but now that'll be a payment to the city.
So the city will come in and do the paving, then simply invoice us?
Correct.
And I've read that there's a significant loss in distribution of water, like maybe 10%. Do we have any idea how much water we lose from, I don't know, cracked pipes or fittings that aren't tight?
Didn't come prepared to talk about that, but we actually have, we adopted the water audit methodology, AWWA's M36 manual, I believe, several years ago. And there's several different bands that you could find yourself in. We're actually in a very good band for our age and for our system and for our pressures. We're good. Our last time we looked at it, which was year before last, our non-revenue water was about, don't hold me to this because I'm going from memory, about 16 or 17%. Some of that is allowable, some of that is unallowable, but our infrastructure leakage index was 3.1 if I remember correctly, which the first band, the very first band is from 1 to 3, and we're
Percent?
just slightly outside that, the best band.
Okay.
Okay. Some of the districts and smaller utility districts, with even newer pipe than we have, I hear that some of them run into the 25, 30, 40% unaccounted for water.
10% would be actually considered very good.
Well, okay. I had no idea. I have a swimming pool and it's leaking more or less.
Well,
You know,
part of what's leaking
always.
is the reservoir, so,
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
you know, we can't quantify it, but we do suspect that that's part of it. But I can tell you that when using the new water audit methodology, we find ourselves in a pretty good position
That's good to know.
comparatively.
Until we use water, it takes water to make water, right? I mean, we use,
Quite a bit
consumes.
more than you would expect.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to give a compliment to Mr. Smith, because I understand the Frankfort Parks, has the aquatic pool. And Mr. Smith is an important resource to the Frankfort Parks Department on that pool and that water technical stuff. So I think a lot of the citizens, I think that pool is pretty popular, and Alan does a lot for them, so.
Yeah, I believe it's more popular than they expected.
Yeah, but I know they depend a lot on you for your technical knowledge, so, especially some all fires, so that's good, what you do up there.
How
Thank
many
you.
years have you been taking care of the pools?
35.
Shows you people turn to FPB people when they need something.
So when you splash in that pool, you can thank Alan, yeah.
I actually took over from Chris Riddle, so Chris did it when I started, so I learned from Chris, who was the old water plant superintendent, so.
Any more questions, comments?
Well, let's see, we're a couple hours in there. We'll take a little break here, and everybody. Okay, we're back in session. Special meeting, reviewing budget. We dealt with electric and we dealt with water and water distribution. Are we ready for cable telecom?
Okay, we'll go ahead and I'll just follow the same format we have with electric and water, just starting with the funding summary on page 25. And then we can get more of the details about what are behind these figures. On the assumptions page on page 8, we lay out for all the 5 years the assumed retail rate, the rate we would charge customers for all of the different lines of business, or I should say lines of service, the telecom division. And we'll get through those here in a minute. But looking at lines 10 and 15 on the funding summary for cable, page 25, total operating and other revenues estimated to be just over $28.3 million. When you take our operating, cable operating and administrative expenses, and also our general overhead admin that's allocated, you have a change in net position. This is a revenue over expenses of just under $3.2 million. That's on line 100. And you can see how we hold pretty steady. Year 2, increase in net position of $2.6 million, and then we hold around $2 million in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. Add back depreciation, estimated to be around $3.4 million over each of the 5 years. And then you can see on line 120, the only, as of now, proposed borrowing would be to draw down the $1.5 million for funds projects already purchased and then put in the field for the head end and infrastructure project, and then an additional $1.7 million that we look to implement and spend into the field in between now and the next fiscal year. Total of that would be $3.2 million in additional funds borrowed. You can see on lines 130 through 140, you can see our debt service. As I mentioned when we looked at company-wide, line 130, the FSN note will pay off in March of 2022. That will be freeing up approximately $2.5 million in principal and interest that we, if you were to extend this budget out, you'd see the benefits of that as well, which would go straight to the bottom line. Main thing, line 160, cash, this is cable division capital additions. You can see that most of we're hovering around the $2.8 million amount in years 2 through 5 for capital additions. And we have year 1, this coming fiscal year, 17-18, we'll get into it. We budgeted $4.9 million. After you back out and subtract the allocation of the administrative capital additions, the end of the year cash reserves on line 190, you can see is hovering between $1.4 and $1.9 million each of the 5 years. So we are as we produce cash, as it's generated through customer payments, you can see we're paying off debt, investing in infrastructure, and holding that, having that reserve balance stay steady. Our recommended reserves on line 230, you can see that's around $5.8 to $6 million. So we are double that minimum cash reserve amount, and we are looking pretty financially stable there. And we'll get into more in talking about some of our thoughts in how we structure rates for all of our lines of service and operating expenses. But I'll go ahead and turn it over, John, to you and go through different stuff here.
I appreciate it very much. I want to introduce and reintroduce to you guys. It's a group effort how we do stuff in the cable telecom department. Adam Heller takes care of giving us a lot of numbers and a lot of insight on the outside plant and the head end. Dana Goodlett gives us a lot of support on the information that we need on the customer premise equipment that we use in the field, be it MTA for telephone, set-top boxes for cable TV, and cable modems and that type of thing for our internet service. He also takes care of really giving us a lot of budget numbers on all of our safety equipment and tools that we use in the field every day. Harvey Couch lends great support to not only me but to the folks in the accounting department on all the stats as far as the number of subscribers we have for the services, the rate schedules. For the cable TV is probably the most intense part of this part of our budget anyway, since there's so many channels and we try and crunch every single penny we can. But also all the marketing information here. So I want to kind of back up, if you don't mind. We'd like to start on the rate side. Alfred talks, or will talk more about rates and stuff. That's what we hear about and read about in the paper all the time. That's what our customers talk to us about the most. I want to say one thing, a couple of things real quick. Water got theirs done in 25 minutes. We have an over of 90 minutes. It looks like everybody's going with over. Two guys didn't get the memo here on the Navy shirt, so we'll try and fix that for tomorrow. Okay, just trying to lighten the mood a little bit, folks. So I want to go back to page 8 and talk a little bit about what we've put together as far as what we want our cable telecom retail rates over the course of the next 5-year plan. We want to focus on the first year for sure, but obviously over the whole 5-year plan. The one thing, to sound like a broken record, I probably talked about this for about 15 years anyway, is the one item in the cable telecom budget that we have the least amount of control over is our programming rates that we pay, fees that we pay for our programming expenses. And over the course of the last several years, the two that have really impacted our customers the most are sports rights for the sports programming that's on our network or on our cable lineup, but also our retransmission consent payments for our Lexington and Louisville broadcasters. In this fiscal year that starts on July 1st, we will not have, we really won't have any major renewals on the cable TV part of our lineup, but what we will have is retransmission consent has to be, for our Lexington and Louisville networks, has to be completed by December 31st. The way the law is set up in the 92 Cable Act is that the broadcaster has until September 30th to tell us what they really want to do, if they want us to continue to carry them and how much they're going to charge us. They have to give us notice by September 30th, but often we don't really know exactly where the starting place is on a negotiation until later in October as far as the rate is concerned. We've talked about it with the board over the course of the last probably 6 months or more. This budget, you should consider this budget that we're presenting to you today from a retrans standpoint is to eliminate our duplicate networks. So today, as you know, we carry 2 NBC, 2 CBS, 2 ABC, and the way that we've constructed this budget is to eliminate those duplicates there on that side of it. I'm going to let Harvey talk a little bit about some of the ideas that we've come up with and working through our accounting department on how we want to deal with rate increases for cable TV and retransmission consent over the course of this budget. You'll see if you look close that we're not recommending any increases on our rates with the exception of cable TV and retransmission consent over the 5-year period. And also we're asking that the board consider an increase of the bundle discount. A bundle discount means customers that have voice, video, or data. They have 2 or 3 of those. You get a discount if you carry if you have 2 or 3 of those different products. We've never touched that discount. It's always been $3 and $6, I guess. $3 if you have a double play, $6 discount if you have a triple play off of your internet. We're proposing in this to increase that discount to $6 if you have a double play or $12 if you have a triple play, as a way of trying to keep our customers, but at the same time trying to be as competitive as possible. So for just a minute or so, if you got I think we have maybe a slide or so that we could show a little bit on some retransmission rates, and I'll let Harvey talk about that for a minute.
Sure. So you can see here the retransmission consent rates that we've paid since 1952, and the increases every 3 years as we've renewed those agreements. The estimates are estimates based on information that we've heard industry-wide on what to expect on those resets. Like John mentioned, we budgeted this to do away with duplicate ABC, NBC, and CBS networks. This is a straight pass-through, so how it's budgeted is the amount in and the amount out is the exact same. So if the number comes in a little bit differently, or if the board decides to handle that differently, it's gonna wash out as far as the revenue and the expense goes. As for rates, if you look at page 8 again on the assumptions, we're proposing no changes to internet rates through the 5 years, no changes to limited cable. In classic cable, we're proposing no increase. Generally, we take increases January 1 or shortly thereafter when the rate resets occur on our agreements. So we're proposing to not take any increases in 2018 or 2019, and then start again in 2020 to start keeping up with the rate of increases. Basically, the thought process on behalf of staff, working with the finance department, was that we really felt we had reached the tipping point for consumers on cable TV, and we've seen a consistent drops over the last several years, and so we felt that this was the time to look at absorbing some of those increases and try to stem the tide on cable TV losses. Generally,
what level are customers, are you, in these rates going out, in the budget you have going out, what level of cable customers are you assuming, are you considering we're going to continue to drop off, or that it's flattening out, or what's our customer base as we go out in 18, 19, and 20?
Sure. I mean, we have, over the last several years, we've seen increases. I mean, we've lost customers every year since 2009. Mm-hmm. It's accelerated to this year, it's about a 1% a month loss. So that's what we've put in the budget. So we're not anticipating, we're just hoping that we can stop it from accelerating faster. So how we budgeted is 12% a year moving out the 5 years, 12% loss of video subscribers.
So at the end of year 2022, mm-hmm. how many cable customers do you think we have left?
That number is in the budget. It is like 8,000 some maybe. I'm sorry that I don't have that at my fingertips. I can give that to you tomorrow for sure.
Then, are you assuming then that internet will continue to climb some?
Yeah. So we budgeted modest growth in the number of subscribers, mm-hmm. Because that's been rapid growth. But at some point, there's only so many people that can subscribe. So that will we think that will continue to grow, but at a slower rate. Where we do think that there's some growth is the average revenue per data subscriber. So sort of the incremental folks wanting to go faster as they use more devices. I mean, if they drop cable TV and they're streaming video over the internet, then maybe they need to use a faster internet speed, and so we've budgeted. And again, I mean, working with David, we feel we're really pretty conservative in what we're projecting on the data side, but we do see some incremental growth.
And then telephone, you're assuming continues to.
So I think continued losses on residential telephone, putting a person to take care of business services. And we also think that the business telephone is, folks want to have a phone for their business. So we see that as more stable, and also maybe be able to bring some new products to market on that, and maybe see small little growth in the ARPU on those.
Well, let me ask you a totally unfair question. Some group of people like us is sitting around here in 2022, and they're sitting around and they're saying, what in the world were those people in 2018, 17 thinking about? Why didn't they do X? What would they basically say we're not doing now that we should have seen coming, that we ought to prepare for?
I mean, I think certainly, that's pretty unfair. No, I'm just joking. On a business side, I'm not sure. I mean, I think certainly on an infrastructure side, I mean, there's things that we need to be doing.
I mean, if we were AT&T or Time Warner, we'd be having this, we'd be talking about now and what our market share is going to be.
Yeah.
And what we could do to increase that. So, I mean, I mean, we're different, that we're a public utility, but we're in that business. So,
Yeah, I mean, some other operators have really looked towards not being a cable TV company anymore. You know, I mean, Cable One is a great example that they consider themselves an internet company and not cable TV. I don't know that that's maybe necessarily the right. I don't think we need to go all the way that way. I think we need to be able to support. I think cable TV is still an important part of our business, and so, but people want to get their content from different ways, and we have to be ready for that and expect that. And I think that's what we're trying our best to get.
are we making the
positioned
right
in that.
investments and steps today to be where my unfair question takes us in 2022?
Isn't that what the consultants are working on?
Well, is it? I mean,
Not so much.
No, they aren't.
are they? I mean, I don't know. I mean, are they going to give us that roadmap to 2022?
I mean, they are, we've asked them to work on the infrastructure side. We haven't asked them on the product development side. That isn't part of what we want them to do for us at this point. You know, we've put money in this budget to do some rate study stuff, but then again, that's still not looking forward to different products. You know, it's from the video perspective, I think we're doing what we need to do to be able to bring it to the customer with the TiVo product, kind of taking their internet type use of over-the-top stuff for Netflix or Hulu and that kind of thing, and getting it in one device, making it easier for that customer. That product isn't for every single customer, though. That's for a higher-end customer that already has 3 or 4 DVRs in their household, and trying to keep the best customers that we have. Cable One is a good example of that, but you know, I don't know that necessarily where they're deciding to kind of de-emphasize it. They haven't added a cable channel since 1998, I believe is what I read, at Cable One. They have pretty much cut out everything. They have dropped major programming families. They were the first to drop Viacom. They dropped a bunch of Turner stuff. They're in acquisition mode right now of buying up a lot of small independents, and as they get to them, then they kind of de-emphasize stuff there too. So we've got a considerable amount of debt still. And, you know, for us to, at this point, to try and de-emphasize something, and we've got almost 5 years left on that original FSN note, I don't know that that's necessarily something we want to really do right
Well, and
now.
I'm not wanting to emphasize additional debt, but also, you know, there's that old saying, penny wise and pound foolish. Is there things we ought to be doing today? I'm not saying if we can afford them or not, but is there things we ought to be doing today that will, in fact, head off a worse problem in 2022 if we did those things now?
Yeah, I think that the next time that you have major programming agreements come up, you ought to think seriously about dropping some of them. The next big one you have is going to be the hardest one to drop, and that's NBC Universal. So, you know, NBC Sports, USA, Sci-Fi, E, Golf, Bravo, Oxygen, those are kind of hard to drop. But collectively, that's probably, I don't know, $6, $5, $6. It's an all or nothing kind of deal. And you've got other opportunities when your other programming family agreements come up in 2019 and 20. That's one way that you can, you know, cut that cost and try and keep customers from leaving you, because they're leaving you over cost. They're not really leaving you over the quality of the service. But they also are leaving you too to go get their video in a different way, and that is over the internet. So trying to make investments into our plant to make that internet experience as good as possible until we can figure out what we want to do long term is what we need to be looking at. You know, I had a conversation just a couple of weeks ago with somebody that sat on this side of the table for a long, long time, and with us here at this company, and the comment was we should have never started paying retransmission consent. And I made this answer several times. We didn't have a choice. Well, we did have a choice, I guess. We could drop off our broadcast, but that's not a choice I think this board or this staff is willing to make, or this staff is willing to recommend. So there's a couple of things you're not going to be able to get rid of. It's going to be tough to do that. And one way that we're talking to you about today is to minimize that cost. One way is to maybe not renew some of the bigger programming agreements down the road. Another way is to cut the duplicates and see what we do there. So we're doing our best to limit some stuff. And as we get a little bit more into, I think we can go a little bit more in depth on what we want to do on rates on cable TV, it's really probably one of the areas we've worked the hardest, has tried to minimize the impact on our customer.
What do you, we had talked at one point several months ago about, knowing what we got coming up later this year with the retransmission.
Yeah.
And then you all did a good presentation on the skinny bundle, and we talked about maybe doing some type of survey or something to see, do customers really want the skinny bundle? And I think, we talked about maybe too many would want the skinny bundle. We didn't know. And then, what do people want? Louisville, Lexington, and if it comes down to that, and if that decision has to be made, because I think we pretty much assume probably the mood of our ratepayers isn't going to be, they will want to keep both, but not pay for it. So we're going to come down to, can we even squeeze 3 of them or 4 of them into the current retransmission, right?
Well, what we've budgeted here is the scenarios we think with one of each, one Fox, one NBC, one CBS. We haven't picked one.
Right.
Which city is what I mean. I'm not sure that I'm answering your
No,
question.
you're right. As to where we at on maybe getting some customer feedback, some real, direct, as to what they really want.
Yeah, I've spoken with 3 different folks about a survey, and so it's in this budget to perform that. And so, once we get through into the next fiscal year, I think we'd be ready to hit the ground running on retrans and the skinny bundle.
We need the info back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think the industry is telling us that not a lot of folks are going down the skinny bundle road, mostly because the way the programming agreements are set up, they're just so darn complicated to make it work and not get sued, basically, for putting the wrong thing in there. We found some things that we need to change, that we recognize. Once we brought it to you, there was one thing that we had left out that had been brought to our attention by the NCTC. So if it comes back, or when it comes back to you, one thing's going to look different about it, because we just have to do it. But what we're finding is, in talking to other cable operators around the country, is that, we've got it, but nobody's buying it. And it's not really helping. It's not really helping the bleed off of customers. Some folks are a little bit differently motivated than we are. The for-profit guys obviously are, because they're trying to stop or slow down or stop the bleed on the cable side. But the not-for-profit guys, there just aren't very many of them doing it. And they would do it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to offer more choice. And we're gonna probably continue to advocate that that's something we think we ought to do. But we need to do the survey work as well, and the retrans survey work.
With the retrans, do any of those local stations offer streaming services for their content? So I guess the thought there being, if we just completely walked away from all the retrans, are there still places our customers can get that content over the net?
Well, was a couple of things happening today. First, from the network programming, we'll use the 60 Minutes on CBS as a network program. CBS owns that, and CBS has a CBS All Access, or whatever they call their product, for $6.99 a month, something like that, and they sell that as its own product. I don't know that necessarily that NBC, ABC, and Fox have that type of thing set up, and so how hard it would be for a customer to go get an over-the-top network stuff. Probably kind of hard on some of the other network affiliates, because they don't have that model set up yet. But as we see changes to and I can't speak a lot about this because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
But it seems like the more difficult component of that is the local news and local weather.
Yeah, and so that's the part that's getting ready to change as these ATSC 3.0 platforms are coming out there. We use an ATSC 1.0 today, is what he uses, what Adam uses to pull that out of the sky and to put it out on our network. And as the FCC allows networks to kind of put this new and improved 3.0 out there, it allows a lot of different things. But one of the things we're seeing on the local level, it gives them, let's say WDKY, the Fox affiliate in Lexington, the ability to stream their local content directly to a customer via, either 3G, 4G, but potentially, essentially, a 5G at some point, and cut us out altogether, or get to us through a cable modem, in that way.
And so would that situation only allow them to stream their originally produced content, or would they also be able to distribute their affiliate content?
My personal opinion is it's their own stuff produced in Lexington and Louisville. The ability to get to the content is something that is between the local affiliate or the ownership group of the local affiliate and the home office back in New York. And I don't know that the home office back in New York wants to share revenue on that. So why would they? Why wouldn't they just cut the affiliate out altogether, kind of like the cable guys getting cut out, and go directly to the customer over the top? We still are okay because of the cable modem, probably.
I mean, I think that is a really good example of, we're seeing there's a lot of fragmentation, and like it is hard to put it, we have the bundle and people are not crazy about 100 channels and maybe they don't watch them all, but they're all there. And if you want to go put it back together, you break it up and then put it all back together and get all the stuff you want, then okay, you might be able to save a little bit of money, but you might be missing a little bit of stuff that you really want. And you've got like 6 different sources, and so I think that is something that we've seen a lot of cord cutting, cord shaving, cord nevers. I think that is a real thing, but I do think that you're going to reach a point where people are like, well, this is maybe not worth it, it's too much work, or it's, I just want to kind of, a lot of folks when they sit down and watch TV, it's like, they don't want to think about it, just show me what I want to watch and come, whatever's on the DVR or whatever's recommended, that's what they want to see. So I do think there is a point where that's going to balance out, and we are seeing a lot more of that fragmentation as the different content. I mean, it's all about the content. The content, folks that own the content are holding on to it, and so you've got to go all these different places as opposed to just coming through us.
The programming side's obviously the hardest part of what we try and put together here. We have very little control of how it gets sold, how it gets distributed, and we sure as heck don't have a lot of control on how much they charge us for it. And it's the only place you can get it. So, ESPN holds all the keys on that one. So it's, I wouldn't say it's one of the biggest things we're guessing here, but so on some of these, on retrans rates for sure, it's our biggest question mark about what's going to happen. I just really don't know. So I want to add one little thing to retrans, and we'll see how this plays out over the next few months. As a cooperative, we buy a lot of our programming through almost all of it through this cooperative, and they've never been able to, or they've never really been willing to, or been able to negotiate retransmission consent on behalf of the membership, mostly because we're in 50 states with 215 or so TV markets and probably 35 or 40 ownership groups of all the different stations. So it's kind of hard to create a mass. But over the last few years, as a lot of the broadcasters have kind of bought and sold each other, there are bigger and bigger groups. So we have a real opportunity this year for the NCTC's been working on this for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months, maybe a little bit longer, to negotiate some of the bigger ownership groups out there. Sinclair being one of them, that's our WDKY over in Lexington. Tegna is an ownership group that owns WHAS, ABC Louisville, Raycom, they own Wave over in Louisville, and Gannett, they own, I think, LKY over there in Louisville. NCTC has negotiated those agreements on our behalf, and we'll see what happens. They may be able to get us, they're not going to give us a cheaper rate, but they'll maybe be able to get us terms and conditions and rates that are better than we can get on our own here in Frankfort. And we might even be able to save $1 on not using outside counsel to really do negotiation for us, because the last several years they've gotten pretty complicated. We need some help. So we might be able to save a few bucks there. But we'll see what happens on the retrans. That's, again, it's the one thing that concerns us the most. Every 3 years, since 1992 we've been doing these, and it's just this time again. So we're concerned. We're concerned that our customers are going to be very resistant, every customer will, to have fewer channels and potentially pay more for their retrans surcharge. That's an awful message to deliver.
I'm not asking you for, especially since we're being taped or for TV here, to negotiate, to talk about your negotiating. And I understand that everybody wants to make more money. I get that part. But why would a network like in Louisville or Lexington want to go all or nothing and take the chance of walking away? Because right now it's just, the money's kind of gravy off the top. I mean, they lose us, they lose market share, and they lose a check. I mean, it's not like they're going to get a smaller check. If we pull the plug and say, we get this cheaper in Lexington, you're out.
Well, there's 2 or 3 things that work against us. I'm going to just stick with Louisville for just a second. we don't reside in the Louisville market. So anything that we add to the Louisville market truly is gravy, because we're outside the DMANs and Shelby County line. And the next part that really hurts us is the large ownership groups here in the United States and in our part of the country, that spectrum. They have rock solid clauses within the agreements that are most favored nation status, that it's impossible for us to work against that. And what that means to if you haven't worked with those kind of things before, is that let's say that they negotiate a rate and a channel number and the other multicast channels that they carry, antenna TV or whatever it is. They get the best deal. They get the best channel position. Spectrum gets the best. They get the best of everything as far as rate and terms and conditions and channel placement. We can't negotiate a better rate than that, and so that works against us because of a couple of 100,000 subscribers that they have versus the 13,000 or so that we have, and that's a stopping point. It's been my experience, and I've negotiated these since '95. As the chart showed, we started paying for them in 2009. It's not. I wouldn't characterize it as a negotiation.
Really?
Yeah. I've provided a written information at the FCC before, saying that I had a letter basically from a broadcaster once that said, you change as much as a period or a comma, your rate just went up. I don't call that a negotiation. So we're just not in a position to negotiate. The thing that's helped us in the past, and I don't know whether it will in the future, is that we have two. And so, but we've never been willing to pick one. We've always just kept them both. And so maybe that works to our advantage this time. I'm not really sure.
I do think there's a floor for those folks, though, so they can't go below some. There's a thing called reverse compensation, so they have to pay ABC, NBC, CBS in order to rebroadcast, and so they can't charge us less than they're paying them, right? And so they're getting whatever is on top of that, but there's a floor for, and obviously the most favored nation clauses to limit how far they can come down on rates.
Now, I'm just going to use this as an example. This isn't a real rate. Let's just say it's $2. NBC has one way of doing it. We want 50% whatever you get. And that's a different negotiation with the affiliate than it is with, let's say, for example, a Fox, which is I get $1.50 and you get everything that's left. It's just a little bit different way that the ownership groups come at us at the affiliate level, depending on how much they've got to pay, as Harvey says, in reverse compensation back to the home office in New York. So it's there is, in talking with the folks at American Cable Association, we've been members a long time. They are our lobbying legislative a group that works on our behalf along with another 800 members. There is almost zero chance that retransmission consent is going to, but we've pounded that drum for, 10 years now. That's a 25-year-old law. And the rules and how programming is fragmented and just how people watch TV is so different than it was in 1992 when the law was established, that we've tried for years just to get Congress to take a look at just changing the rules a little bit, making it more free market, make it more, give us, today it really kind of isn't free market. We have to take Lexington for the most part. We have to start there, and just due to geography, we're one of few communities across the United States that really kind of sits in two markets. So having the ability to have both is really unique, and just changing the rules in a way to make it more free market where you could shop for the best price, best deal, because it behooves us, right, to stay with Lexington or Louisville. It doesn't really, we shouldn't go to Cincinnati or Dayton, Ohio. Adam can pull the signal down, but who cares what the ball score was in Dayton last night, or what the weather's going to be tomorrow? We need to stay closer to home, but it needs to be opened up a little bit where we can negotiate a little bit better. The toughest decision for the staff and for the board ultimately to make, in talking with our customers, is to do something we've never done in almost 60 years of having a network here, and that's not have two of everything. That's tough. But potentially $19.17 is the estimate for 18 versus almost $24 for keeping everything is our estimate for the big four, plus the CWs and my network TVs and all the TV everywhere and video on demand. That's a lot of money.
So just, if I could just put a bow on the rates, so we're looking at keeping everything the same, except for the classic cable, keeping that flat for the first 2 years. And then on the, like John mentioned earlier, the multiple service discounts, those have been the same since we established them, I don't know, what, 10, 12 years ago?
Longer than that.
Yeah, 2001. That's when we established those discounts. And so we were proposing to increase those. They're $3 and $6 today to increase that to $6 and $12, and just to basically reward those customers who have multiple services. So if you want to look at this chart here, on the left, that's your cable bill today. This is for a customer with classic cable and our premium 25 megabit internet. And the next column over would be if we pass through all the video rates and kept all of the retrans and kept the discount the same, they would look at a bill that would go from $128.53 to $141.94. So what this budget proposes is that next column, which is keep the classic cable rate the same at $63.50. Drop duplicate retrans, which would lower that retrans cost from $21.79 to $19.17, and then increase the discount for the multiple services. So their increase would be just over $4 instead of over $13. And then again, it's just brought out the next year as well. The fourth column is passing through everything, and the last column is keeping things static, but passing through the retrans increases.
And that's what we've tried to do our best is to, those customers, and it's a very high percentage of our customers that have at a minimum a double play. It's I believe it's in excess of 75 or 80%. I can give you the exact number. I don't have it in my head. We can get it for you. It truly represents the average customer, and trying to control these costs. This is just a couple of different ways that we've come up with to not pass on the rate increases on cable TV, but in pass on the retransmission consent stuff, and to increase the discount on the double or triple play by $3, $6, depending on what you have. So we think that's a good story to tell over the course of a couple of years. Talk a little bit more about year 3, 4, and 5 as far as cable TV is concerned. We've started to pass on some of the cable rate increases in year 3, 4, and 5. Again, as we get into years 3, 4, and 5, we're getting into renewals of some of our cable networks, some of our bigger ones, and so these are a little bit more estimates because we don't really know exactly, what the Turner networks are going to cost us in 2019 and 20 as we do the renewal or Viacom or anything else. So it's just our best estimate on what we've experienced over the past 2 renewals.
Yeah, so we're showing a $3 increase to classic cable in 2020, and that's compared to what our budget would be an additional, or how we've budgeted the increases would be an additional $6. So we would only pass through half of that. 2020 is a kind of an ugly year for us on renewals. Turner, Scripps, I feel like there's one other big one. But those just at minimum, those two have a pretty significant impact on our programming costs. So when they renew, they reset and they all go up. So working with David, that would be the point where we would need to start taking some to keep up, not get upside down on the video side. So $3 in 2020, and then $2.50 in 2021, and $2 in 2022. So basically, we would stay flat for until January 2020, and then take about half of what our programming cost increases would be.
Harvey, could you go back to the slide right before that? Those options based on what, David, you've got in the book in terms of assumptions, which one matches up with those bars?
So the assumptions are based on, well, obviously the first one is today.
Right.
The budget is based on column 3 and column 5. That's
Okay.
that's what's baked into this document.
Okay.
The other columns are basically if we had continued to do as we have in the past, keeping everything, passing everything through, and not taking any additional discounts.
What other slides do you have? Yeah, let's try that one. So we wanted to talk about, and we can come back to any of this stuff. Actually, I'd probably just better stop here for a second and see if you have additional questions on the video side. It's the hardest one for us to pin down. I'll just be quite honest with you. There's a lot of moving parts. The retrans is worrisome.
The other comment on the video that I had was, it'd be informative if when these large contracts came up to us, that we also had some information on what the customer's alternate sources could be for that content. Sure. If we drop,
yeah.
if we
And
end up
they're
not
generally
renewing
tied
it.
to the group. So
Sure.
yeah, so that would be pretty, when the Turners come up, it's like, here's where all the Turner content is.
Yeah.
It's on Hulu or it's on.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the co-op is really doing a better job than they used to in aggregating that info for us to see where, because it could be anywhere. And some of it, though, isn't.
Yeah.
Some of it's pretty well locked down to where you really can't get it except through the distributor on the linear side. So, but I think that's going to continue to change. It almost has to.
That's funny. I noticed last night, I usually watch the local channels, and Wave TV is running a Roku commercial for Roku, showing they can get Wave TV news live through Roku. And so Wave is promoting going to Roku, in that you sure go because you can keep us.
Yeah, I think there's I don't remember which channel it was that got into a fight in the Louisville market just in the last 3 or 4 months with Dish Network, where their retransmission consent agreement came up and it didn't get negotiated. So those bigger companies negotiate now through the media and through the blackout, and really the customer's the one that loses. And so I don't know if it's tied to that or not, but it might be. There's the bigger companies are doing that anymore. We'll hand out free devices like a Roku or something like that, or an antenna.
When it was Lexington a couple months ago, they just turned it off
Yeah.
during the day and said, "You want it back on? Here's your new rate."
Yeah, it's I think LEX and I don't know if that was Direct or if that was probably Dish again. Yeah, Dish gets into fights with everybody. That's pretty much how it works out. We've gone dark too. We went dark with WDKY for about 9 months back in 2005, but we had WDRB, so it didn't hurt. So we went dark with WLKY back in 2007 or 8, I can't remember the year, for probably a week. And but having the other, our customers, I really haven't lost anything.
That answers my earlier question about is any of that local content actually available, over the top in any way? So since that is, how pervasive is that? And should we also be considering just getting rid of the retrans altogether and thinking about other vectors for the local folks to be able to get that local program? Have we actually looked at what the
we can certainly
look like
collect that, because I think each station is going to be different. I know some folks partner with some OT over the top.
But if we get one or two, is that?
Yeah, and then that's usually going to be your local content, and so then it's going to be on the customer to put together all the the network content. The other thing, the other thing to go back to is the Cable Act of 1992, which I don't know that. I guess how it would work not having any local.
Oh, wait. If they choose retrans, we can walk away. Obviously, if they choose the must carry, we have to carry in, but that also means they can't charge us for it. So that solves itself. We would really need to do some more analysis of what can be found.
It also goes back to what I mentioned before about the fragmentation, right? And making it harder for the customer and deciding whether that's worth it to them to save a few dollars to have to plug an antenna in or get a Roku and set it up and make sure you have internet, because maybe you don't have internet, or, you know what I mean?
But we could also facilitate those decision trees for those folks too, right? We could look at that up front and see what sense that makes. As we're still
As like
providing internet, we're
providing
still
the
a
hard-
customer of ours.
Yeah.
And so maybe there are some of those that make more sense to start offloading.
Okay.
I mean, in general, it's I think it's everybody would agree, it's clear that current linear delivery technology is sunsetting.
Yeah.
It's to us to figure out what that path looks like, right, and when we're going to start jumping ship.
It's hard to imagine, though, what kind of customer losses we would have without the big four. And I really probably I don't want to use words against me in in negotiations later on in the fall, how popular the programming is. So if you were to ask us for, some, we could probably get you some viewership data, and I think it would tell a pretty compelling story on which if networks are important to our customers and which are not.
And those numbers are clearly going to be very different today than they're going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So whatever deal you sign, if you decide to sign them, they're going to lock you in for 3 years, through 18, 19, and 20. So it'll be interesting to see where this is 3 years from now. Okay, you want to do a little bit of internet real quick, and David put this together for us also that kind of showed a little bit of historic information on rates and speeds with what we have. We had I think it's really one of the few rate increases we've had on broadband back in 2012, and we don't really have any plan for the duration. You see that blue line kind of throws you off a little bit. That's the 100 megabit that we just started offering in March. So I would anticipate faster speeds, and we could talk about that a little bit later. I'd probably really kind of defer some of the speed type stuff to Casey Jones. He's probably got a better handle on that than I do. But over the term of this, we really aren't looking at making any changes to the rates at all, and just actually offering faster speeds for the same retail price to our customers on both the residential and the business side. We were successful with that in March, and I expect us to be just as successful moving forward into the fiscal years to come. I think I want to, some of the bigger items on here, and I think I want Adam to talk about it a little bit. I want to step away from from video and the retail side of video and broadband for a little bit, and talk about the money we have set aside in here. We borrowed from the bank, and that we have set aside for the improvements to the replace amplifiers and extenders. We really haven't changed our, with one exception, we haven't changed our capital addition information that we provided to you than what we did several weeks ago at our initial budget draft meeting. The change really is an idea that Herbie had a few weeks ago, and we ran with it. Was to try and do the plant improvements a lot faster by using contract labor to help us, not to do it for us, but to assist us in moving the schedule up. Adam could talk a little bit about what the equipment does, what we get out of it. The lead time on the equipment is a little bit of an issue, and how the contractors could help us in that area.
Yeah, basically we're looking at changing out all of our active equipment that we have today. It's 17 years old. When we change it out, we will actually increase our bandwidth available to our customers by about 40 qualms. So basically what we're looking at is we were trying to do it in-house over a 2-year period. Kind of talked about it. We'd like to get it done a little earlier. We have the cash available to buy the actual items themselves. So in early budget meetings, we decided to push it all in 1 year and bring contract labor in. We think we can make that work. The only issue we might have, it's 12 weeks lead time. So if we approve this budget, we start July 1, it's going to be October before we hang the first widget. So as we start doing that, we might run over maybe a month or two in the next fiscal year, but we're going to do our best to get it all done in this our next fiscal year. So
that would be the assumption to use. That money you're talking about would be the remaining 1.6 million that's left.
Basically, that's the setup. And then the way that the way you should consider the way the budget is set up on the CapEx side is that the contract labor would be paid for out of reserve or out of cash, so to speak, a better way of saying that, because you can't the way that we don't have the money anyway, but the way the loan's set up, we really can't use and reimburse ourselves for contract labor is the way I understand it. So we haven't been able to do that on any part of our project. So those are really the only other modification we made to the, and as we reduced it on the fiber to the home project. We've just talked about it quite a bit. We really didn't know what to do with the 1.5 million we have in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. We just left that from the previous year. Our consultant's not going to get us the draft of what they're going to say to us until probably middle to the end of July. And then we would expect to work not only with the board, but with the staff to kind of go through the draft itself, get it back to them, and have them come in the August board meeting to kind of give us their findings. Because of that, and just kind of trying to think about some timetables, whatever the outcomes of the consultants group is, and if we want to move forward with implementing some of it, all of it, none of it, or some of it anyway, is some of the engineering that needs to go along with that to come up with the idea of what we want to do and how we want to put together an RFP and put that out on the street for engineering services. We're probably not going to be able to do much of that before the end of the third quarter or so of this fiscal year, or the next fiscal year, which means February, March. And so I kind of pulled back on the CapEx on fiber to the home on page 18 on line 20 back to about $100,000. And that's just because there's only going to be about 3 months left in that fiscal year anyway. You're not going to be able to spend, you're just not going to be able to create that much of an expenditure on that item, I don't guess, in the last quarter of that fiscal year. So it didn't make a lot of sense to pile a bunch of money in there, and we had really no way of really using or spending. So we didn't add it to any of the other years because, quite frankly, we just don't know exactly what the report's going to say, and we certainly don't have a good feel yet for how we're going to just decide what we're going to do next. We got a lot of time to work on that over the course of this next fiscal year, and we just need to make some right decisions. But what we wanted to show was some sort of dollars in this so we could see what kind of impact it would make on what it is that we want to try and provide to our customers. So we left that part of it in there for years 2 through 5. But obviously all that kind of thing is subject to kind of moving that around if we think we need to.
So John, you thinking the 1.7 left in the bond issue, 1.6, whatever it is, David? Does that money just need to stay as a placeholder till we get that report? Or do you think no matter what that report says, what you're proposing to spend the remaining balance of that note is what we've got to do based on the age of that equipment?
Yes, I think we should have done it probably 2 or 3 years ago. So, yeah, based on the age of the equipment, I think that's kind of goes back to that question you asked earlier. What's the board going to say in 5 years? What should we done? And that would be quality of the service that we offer. And without doing this upgrade, excuse me, got some sinus issues. Without doing this upgrade, that's going to come back and haunt us. I really feel so.
But if we don't have any sense of where we're going to be going in those next 5 or 6 years, or 5 or 10 years, why would we put any more money into the existing plant until we had some sense of what that path is forward and what those expenditures are going to be?
Well, I think we kind of know what the path is as far as on the network side. I mean, you've been to several of the meetings with the consultant.
Right. But I guess we're making a policy decision there before we have the information out in front of us.
Well, the consultant sent some stuff out, last weekend and included you on the email, and I've sent it over to Ms. Poe, and I was hoping, I don't know that it has gotten out to the rest of the board. We asked the consultant. He gives us a monthly update anyway, and it's due this week to turn in for the June meeting. So I asked him to consider, putting that in his monthly report, and it's contained in his monthly report that's something that they're going to recommend that we just go ahead and do, is to spend the money on the outside plant.
Right.
Spend it on what?
The outside
exactly?
plant, the amplifiers and the line extenders.
Would that be duplicating the efforts towards fiber to the home?
It would be, but I mean, it's the same service you're offering. If you do fiber to the home, it's going to take, unless you want to borrow a lot of money, based on what this consultant is saying at this point, we're going to be fiber, or we're going to be coax for a while, unless we're talking about, I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about it here, but some of his numbers are $40 million. that we would have to borrow or come up with to build fiber to the home. So what I'm thinking is we might not want to do it, we might not want to borrow $40 million, but if we can do an active upgrade for $2 million and buy us 10 years, that might be the better way to approach it. But, you know.
There's a lot of debate about what better means.
Right, and you're the board, so I mean, if you want us to scratch that, that's fine. I mean, I'm just telling you my opinion that we need to do it.
Yeah.
If we don't do it, it's going to go back, it's going to affect our customers, and if it affects our customers, then we do decide to do fiber to the home, or we don't have customers to put on the system because we've ran this to its end of its life. So.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate the strains, the current infrastructure is under, but I'm very uncomfortable, putting more money into the plant before we have some sense of where we're going, and especially until we've gotten through, the numbers from, what that transition looks like, especially since they're so much higher than all of the industry numbers you see. I mean, you see OME rolling out to a similar number of customers for less than half of that dollar.
Well, see, the other issue that what I'm trying to wrap my head around is basically a lot of your new fiber to the home companies, they're startup, they're greenfield.
Sure.
They don't have any customers. So what we're faced with is whatever we take from coax plant is going to fiber to the home. So you're not netting a new customer. You might net a difference, which is going to be more of a cost increase to the customer. They might get a better service, but you still have to take an existing customer and move them over to a new system and still be able to pay for the debt.
Right, but that situation only gets more difficult if you throw more money into the existing system. Right.
Well, I can see that, but
and
also
the dynamic
see
with how that functions long term is people move towards more over the top content delivery.
Right.
And then as workforces become more distributed and we're able, because anything we do with the current plant is only going to affect significantly their downstream ability.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect their upstream, and it's not going to affect the latency. So we're leaving 2/3, no matter what we do, we're leaving 2/3 of that quality of service discussion out of the picture with any of these dollars that we're spending.
For budget purposes, correct me if I'm wrong, David, we've got 3 decisions in front of us on that. Either don't use the money at all, don't draw the money and save the debt service. Spend the money as proposed for what you're talking about, Adam, or defer on how to deploy that money until July, till we see that report. But the bottom line, if we decide not to return the money that we have needs for a couple of places, then all we're doing and all we have to do for this budget, submitting it, is to leave the 1.7 million in as a placeholder, right?
Correct.
That makes the assumption we're going to use the money, service the debt, and that the money is available. And if for some reason we still decide not to use the money, so be it. We just don't have it. But at a minimum, if we want to have those options, we got to put the money as a placeholder.
That's fine. As long as we disconnect the actual expenditure.
Yeah.
That's
But keeping the money as a placeholder keeps all the options on the table.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to read the report that came from Engineering Associates a couple of days ago where he recommends spending the money.
Mm-hmm. And you think the final report, John, the grand report will be mid-July?
He's going to get us a draft in mid-July.
Okay.
He said that he would, our goal was to have it before the board, the final report, and the report to the board in person at the August meeting.
Okay.
And I guess the other option we didn't talk about was not doing, if we do choose to do those upgrades to the existing plan, is not doing them out of debt and doing them out of revenue and spread that time out.
What's the life expectancy of the equipment that you're talking about buying, Adam? What's the life expectancy of that compared to the term on the note?
Probably 10, 12 years, and we're 17 years. So we're way past life expectancy of what's hanging out there now.
Okay.
And all that gets towards a headwind in any transition to higher quality service we might have in the future, right?
I'm just trying to figure out, is the life cycle of the equipment we're buying
longer than
the note that we're paying for?
The note term is shorter than the life.
Okay.
The life of the equipment.
It's kind of like, bonding for 20 years a truck. I mean,
Yeah.
you get a low payment, but it's not.
But there's 2 components to that, right? There's, by buying that equipment, you're also signing up for that debt term because you're going to have a headwind to get out of that equipment and move towards newer technology, right?
And I would add, for Adam, they got equipment that is not being made no more, they're trying to maintain, so we got to go to aftermarket companies to find parts. And anything we go to do is gonna take a couple of years to do, so You know, $2 million is a lot of money to me, but the overtime, to keep customers not leaving and having problems. Some neighborhoods that Adam has replaced this equipment, we see a big improvement on the service and less complaints and less trouble calls. So I just want to, throw that out.
I mean, like I said, it's fine. We can pull it out.
Yeah. Well, we're not
We're
pulling
not
it
saying,
out.
yeah.
No, the money's, I think, well, we're not making new votes this,
Right.
but for discussion purposes,
Yeah.
there are two of the three options are to leave the money in as the placeholder. And so everything's still available.
Okay.
So the only option that would take the money away is if the board voted to take the money out and readjust the budget for the debt service. I guess that'll come when we make a grand vote on however we do that.
The third lien lease pays off in December of 2029, so the head-in building, all that in 2029, 10 years, 12 years from now, would be paid for.
We have a shot clock on the funds, on the availability of these funds, I think December 31st of this year, that we need to do something or not. And
what does that mean?
We
We have to have expended it, or at least placed orders for the equipment, or obligated it, or?
We would need to physically spend the funds, or we could prove to lender that we have.
Or do you have to have the stuff on the dock, or do you just have to have placed an order and have a valid
I
order?
think that would be fine. But
Okay.
It's going to be,
Yeah, because
Gotcha.
you're 12 weeks lead time. So if we push this till, budget's July 1, but we're not going to get the report till end of July. So August, we'll be, even if we decide to do it by that point, you're going to be really tough to get it here.
yeah.
Which that means you're going to blow the project out another year because there's no way that we could get it done in
Would
that
it be
6 months.
possible to ask them to speed up the report?
I mean, I can ask, absolutely. I don't know, I don't know if they can do it or not, if they've got, other projects they're working on and that kind of thing. I will definitely ask them.
But you think, David, if we place the orders, I know, Adam, there's a seat there in terms of equipment, but in terms of, we'd be safe to say if the order had been placed and received by a vendor and they could make the shipment, we would not have to have the stuff on the dock.
I'll need to check.
We could pay for it and obligate the funds, and it would not have to actually been received yet, if we had a valid order.
I'll get a more solid answer
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
Going back to page 18 on the CapEx side, really the majority of these are pretty straightforward. It's equipment that we need either to continue to provide service or make improvements on some equipment that's in the field, or customers ask us for stuff as far as fiber projects, extensions, that kind of thing. I want to make sure that we say this. You, Mr. Cubine asked earlier on page 18 on line 55. You'll notice that it's a 713 number on that line for. If you look at the very back of your budget on page 72. We cannot capitalize, didn't know this, learned something new from the accounting group. We can't capitalize the demolition work. We have to expense that. And so the expense estimate that GRW gave us a few months ago is found on page 72. It's in the bottom third of the page. And you can look at that third column where there's a description. There's a description called repair and maintenance expense. The second one that's there is parking lot demo. And so you could see that 186 number out there, and that brings you back to that 860 number. I didn't know if that would create a question, but that's, I wanted to get that there. I really don't have much to say about the replacement policy on the vans and pickup trucks. I think we're following all of our policies there, and you can see we're replacing some things that are 10 or more years old, depending on which kind of vehicle it is or what we use it for.
What is line 60?
Advances in contracts is, if a developer was to come to us and ask us to, provide service.
Gotcha, okay.
Kind of like at the new car wash or the new hotel or something out on Versailles Road, that we would prepare something, and that essentially we would have to have dollars in the account to be able to run through that, and they pay us back, and then we have a kind of a refund over the period of time, depending on what it is. If you have any questions on any of the other items on there, I'd be happy to do our best to answer your questions for you.
Do we need the number of vehicles that we have? Are they all utilized? Are there?
There's a few vans that we're not using right now because we have been shorthanded on staff.
Well, we're actually using them to transport
But we are using them.
personnel from the head end to the cable building every day. So all the vehicles that are available, I'm borrowing from my staff because we're not parking bucket trucks on the, so I don't know what we'll do when we get all fully staffed. We might have to actually request some more vehicles to be able to get people from point A to point B because of the decision not to have bucket trucks at the head end facility.
Why do the bucket trucks need to go to the head end before they go out and do work?
That is their office.
Oh.
That is where they actually work out of. So they basically come there in the morning, we go over what we need to go over. They take the vans across and get the bucket trucks and then go out and work. And then, you know, sometimes they might show up during the day, but that was allowed. And then at the end of the day, they take the bucket trucks back to Hickory Drive and then get in the van and bring it back to Tanglewood.
Why wouldn't they just park their car at Hickory?
I guess we could, but then they still have to come to the head end, and that was the thing, is we didn't want a lot of bucket truck traffic there unless it was, you know, actually doing work, so that's why we're doing it today.
Oh, so instead of going out in the morning in a van to get a truck and bringing it, they're only going out when they actually need to go out in the field and get a bucket truck?
No, it just depends on what they're doing. I mean, some mornings they might stay and work in the head end, so they wouldn't need a bucket truck. But my understanding was that we didn't really want bucket trucks at the head end, so it would be, if they parked their personal vehicle at the cable building, then they'd have to bring their bucket truck across so we could do a startup meeting and then leave. And so we decided the other way was the nicer way of doing things, I guess.
You know more logistics of how everything goes during the day. There's no reason you couldn't have a startup meeting down on Hickory with technology, with, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could
I just wonder if
redo our
those-
workflow and do that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
really not a place, I mean, we could have it on the hood of the truck at Hickory.
Yeah.
I mean, that building's fully, I mean, that building's full. It's got a lot of people in it, so it'd be, to find a place to have a startup meeting might be a little difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose they could have a startup meeting here then.
But then you've got this problem because the trucks are in.
Yeah.
But I mean, that
I
concept.
mean,
Oh.
I'm trying to do my best
Yeah.
with what we got,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
you know, if whatever you guys want
know,
me to
I
change,
just-
I'll be more than glad to do, but, you know, I've
Is
been
that
going.
conference room there that busy that it wouldn't be available for?
That's where Dana has a startup meeting every morning.
And the construction department has their own startup meeting as well, 3 different
Yeah,
work
so-
groups. So they all pretty much arrive within 15 minutes of each other. And it's a building built for 20, and we run about 50 people out of there. So, yeah, we're constrained.
Could any of the other departments move here? Would it make sense?
Not really. We had talked about, that some folks had talked to us about maybe moving some of Dana's front office folks, but to be quite honest with you, they interact with the customer and then in turn have to interact with the installer on the equipment that either comes to or goes out from the company every single day. They have to physically talk to each other, work together, get the equipment ready, bring the equipment back if the customer wasn't home, something wrong with the equipment. Separating those two, the installation group and the front office group, just really doesn't make sense for our workflow because they have to interact with each other, with literally handing each other pieces of equipment and then taking it back. So the Cable 10 side or the media services side, to be honest with you, those groups function together, and there really isn't a place for a TV studio here. So I think with the group that we have, really there isn't a way to really break them up. They're interdependent with the different work groups inside the building. So, but I'm open to suggestions. I just haven't come up with a good one. You had to move somebody over here. What other questions might you have on this, on the capital addition side of what we have here? Again, it's cable modems and set-top boxes and MTAs for our telephone service. It's security equipment and payroll for the installation. It's high cap services. It's making some changes to our CMTS to integrate more bandwidth that Adam is going to be hopefully able to recapture through some changes he's making on the video side to offer faster speed to our internet customers later in the first part of the fiscal year, is what the goal is there. And then that pretty much goes through the capital addition side of the budget for cable telecom. And I'd be happy to, with the help of some of these other folks, answer the questions you might have.
So there was some discussion earlier about looking into the potential of doing co-location out of the excess space in our data center.
Yeah.
Where is all that?
Yeah, we had a good conversation. I kind of want to lean on Casey a little bit with some of the. We think it's a good idea. We don't have we don't really have the experience at all internal to the company to understand maybe what the customer requirements are going to be for us to be able to offer the service, or just a potential customer base. So I think he's got some good ideas of maybe asking for some help. Somebody kind of giving us some consulting services.
Right, so basically what we had talked about amongst ourselves was that, you know, we don't really have a good place to do a co-location. The NOC is probably better suited than either this building or the head end. We've got problems with separate secure entrances, the diversity of the fiber coming in and out of this building in particular. The NOC is obviously better suited in those respects. The other problems are we don't have any redundant cooling in our data center in this building. We don't currently have any kind of secure cabinets or cages. We might need some 24/7 site access. There's remote hand services or things like that where we get a call in the middle of the night and somebody wants us to reboot a server or take a look at equipment. It just seems like there's a ton of things to consider before we start down that path. But as for the building that's best suited for it, probably the NOC is still better than either the head end or the data center here.
What expenses do we have in the budget for the NOC the next fiscal year, the current structure downtown? Has anybody left in it?
No, utilities, I'm thinking what utilities would be used is all I can think of right now.
Yeah, I'll defer back to Casey again. He's the one that really has the most equipment in there. Not only just the equipment, though, it's our connectivity to the outside world that kind of runs through that. Adam might be able to touch a little bit on what it means on the HFC side of our plant that runs through that building.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything in the budget other than paying the bills. There is no money in here to remove it or remove plant board facilities out of it, if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, because at one point, we've touched on it briefly. Is that a building at some point from a surplus standpoint or from other revenue that we could lease out as something, since we're in here, we've got the head end, do we need to maintain that piece of property, or is there some other revenue options for that property?
Well, I think that's kind of what Mr. Jones was hitting at, to, possibly use it for co-locate. It is a very critical part of our network. So if, we decided when we approved the budget to get rid of it, I could see us spending a couple $100,000 to move out of it. Because we couldn't move very far because you have two diverse routes coming into that facility. So probably, we kicked the idea around is basically we would have to set a hub at that satellite parking that's in between the downtown office and the NOC building itself. And we'd have to set a hub there and put basically equipment in it, because that's where those routes come together without actually building back into the system further. That's also where part of our, all of our connectivity for our local phone is there as well. A lot of our providers, if not all of our providers, have a presence there.
It's also security for the FSN, so we'd have to get the security released from
Oh,
the
that's right, yeah.
Casey, I don't know what type of, he's talking more, Adam's talking more on the network side. What does it mean on the local network side?
Oh, just for IT, yeah, for the company, all of our servers and everything is still located there. We haven't tried to move any of that into this building just yet. We're still trying to make sure we understand all the systems that we've got and getting everything finalized there. We've got networking equipment in this building and starting to put some things in here onesie twosie, but yeah, all of our computing infrastructure is still in the NOC.
So going back to the co-location discussion, how do we get from what we can't do to what the opportunity is there? How do we quantify what that revenue could be? How do we have some sense of what the potential value there is and all that?
That's a good question. I'd almost think we'd have to engage a consultant to help us figure out what we would need to do at a minimum to equip that facility with the equipment and the security and all the facilities that somebody might expect in a small co-location facility, but also help us identify the potential revenue.
Yeah, because I think a lot of that is, having been in a lot of co-location facilities, they go from Wild West, completely open, to very nice, secure individual access and all of that. And I think a lot of that, and what direction we would go in, would be determined by what kind of customers we might already have around the area and what kind we might proceed.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one other thing, building upon that, a lot of, at least I personally feel like a lot of the customers that we might want to go after would require us to have the data center certified as both HIPAA, PCI, and SOC compliant. So, and there's costs and other things that go along with that. So, I think having a consultant kind of help us out with that is the best route, just because it's something we've never tried to do before.
Yeah. So can you get us the data that you have so far and get us a proposal on how we would pursue what that opportunity is?
Yeah, I can get you what I've got and start from there.
John, what's the future on phone, you think?
We're gonna, the way we budget is, we're gonna continue to lose customers on the residential side. I think that, Harvey talked about a little while ago, that I think we made some inroads in just the last 5 or 6 months as we have brought David Columbia on, and he's had some success in gaining some customers on the business side. We were talking to David just a couple of days ago about this, that 2 months in a row, we haven't reported the numbers to you yet, but we will here at the June meeting. We've been budgeting 50 or 60 phone losses per month for, a couple of years now, something like that. 2 consecutive months of 28, a minus 28, which, that's, to me, that shows it's starting to slow down a little bit. Not on the residential side. Where we're picking it up, though, is the success that David has had really on the small and medium-sized business. And as part of the, segue at 5 o'clock to the public hearing side, providing him more tools and some more some more services that we can provide to customers for some things they're asking us for that we're not able to provide today, is only going to really help that out.
In terms of revenue to expenses, how does it break down? Is it basically self-sufficient? I mean, is it costing any other lines of business money, or is it?
Actually, let me double check the page on that. In working through the accounting department over the course of, as we finish up really our first true fiscal year of allocations, in a way that are a lot more structured than we have done in the past. And I think these guys have, not just David, but Katrina as well, have done a great job in trying to really pinpoint the revenue, and more expense than revenue, but the expense of where it goes. And looking over the course of the budgeted numbers, and we can show you what page it's on, but just to kind of answer your question the best I can. The net contribution on telephone, the way we have it budgeted in year one, is 1.3 million. Year 2 is 1.1 million. Year 3 is just under $1 million. Year 4 is about 800,000, and year 5 is about $650,000. That's all in. That's all of the general and admin expenses, all the operating expenses, and that's right down to the bottom line is how we're doing the allocation. So it's definitely making money. I think it goes back to what we came to a couple of boards ago, a couple of years ago, that had we not made the changes that we made to our telephone service, we were going to be in the red about 1920 or fiscal year 2021. And this is showing a pretty good turnaround just because of the way that we've really allocated our expenses differently and made some major changes the way we're providing the service. But we can get you a page number on that. It's just a worksheet we have.
Okay.
We've got the statement of revenue, expenses, and net position broken out for each line of business for telecom, and we'll get you a copy of that so you can see how all those fit into the total that you see in your board packet there, or your budget. The depreciation is not allocated out, so that depreciation is sitting out, and that's the one piece that you bring in. But all of each line of service is self-sufficient today. You do see when you look at cable TV, that by year 5, we're actually showing a small, like $16,000 loss. Each year it continued to show how we're absorbing rate increases, not taking as much of a rate increase to customers. But that kind of goes along with what we talked about with cable TV. It is a service provided to our municipal customers, and the decision on how we want to go forward with that.
And the trade-off is we could reduce losses, but we might lose customers.
Yeah, and then looking at, as a municipal utility, what is our purpose in providing a service, not necessarily going after the margin.
And is it appropriate, I think, for a customer that doesn't subscribe to a certain service like cable TV, if they're a broadband only or something like that, is it fair for them to be subsidizing a cable TV loss? And the way we've got it set up, it kind of zeroes out it. And we're making, again, pretty broad assumptions on the expense side of cable TV out there years 3, 4, and 5, especially 4 and 5, because we don't know what the increases are going to be on some of those programmers. But we still show it breaking even and not being subsidized by the broadband side of our business. So we can give you that. It's all in here, but we can give you, pull these sheets out separately, and you can see it line by line, or business line by business line, and you can see all the expenses that way.
Back to the knock, I think there's an opportunity to lease or rent the office space in the bottom floors of the knock. Right before Tim Zissoff left, he expressed an interest for their IT group, perhaps being interested in that space. So that way you would keep the facility for the security on the loan, but still have a leased income.
So you can put your sales hat on and
Yeah, I think the new city manager comes to work on Thursday, and we'll get with the new city manager.
maybe Friday afternoon.
Give them an hour or
We'll
two
put
to
the yard
settle
sign.
in.
We'll put the for sale sign in the yard tonight. And I just realized that I neglected to say something on page 18 CapEx side on page 18 line 25. New services is kind of a broad definition of contract labor for helping us for installs. And quite frankly, it has saved us in this fiscal year. We've had contractors since 2007 or 8, I guess. And the goal being that it cuts down on the wait time for the install and for us to work the trouble call. And we have focused our contractors on installs for quite some time. And Dana and his group has been fortunate not to have any turnover in the installation department for 8 years. And he had the same 11 guys for 8 years, which is just actually pretty incredible. But since July, he's lost 5. And he's lost them for different reasons. Either we've lost them to vet over the electric department, and or actually we've lost a few, I guess. We had some folks just leave the company altogether, in new careers, different areas. And we had some folks take jobs within cable telecom, just a little bit different role and kind of a promotion. So that kind of opens that up. And I don't want to forget, obviously, we lost Steve Forrest back at Thanksgiving time. So we talked over the course of the last several months, and the board has talked to us about really trying to work hard to bring the installation in-house. And so what this budget shows is you need to give us a little time to train up some more staff. And so the budget will show that we spending $250,000 is the goal here for 2018, which is a reduction versus this year on contract labor. But at the same time, work very quickly to hire 2 new installers to really pick up that slack in year 2 and beyond. And so the spend on the contract labor goes away after year 1.
But you're beefing up the number in the salaries and.
Yeah, our goal is through this budget is to bring on 2 brand new installers, which really brings if this went through and is approved, 7 of his 13 would be brand new collectively with less than a year's experience. It's had an effect on our trouble call over the course of the last several weeks. The stormy time of the year where we have a few more outages than usual because that's just the way it is and the weather, and having some folks that just, it's hard to replace 70 or 80 years of experience with not being able to attract folks to the jobs that come to us with any experience. I think of the 5 hires that we're going to have, I think only 1 person actually had any cable telecom experience. The rest of them are brand new, 0 experience, and it takes us a good 12 to 15 months for that individual to be self-sufficient.
What is the pool of contractors out there? I mean, is it a limitless pool of contractors you can hire, or is it to a point where they say, I don't have any more people to get you?
No, actually, the trend in cable telecom is not to have full-time staff; is to contract it out. And the guys that we use today, Custom Cable, we are obviously their smallest account with 2 employees that they're sending to us, but they are a big-time contractor for Charter and or Spectrum in some parts of the country, Charter in others, and they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees that do the installs and do the trouble calls. And that's just what a lot of companies are doing. Altice has come in, French companies come in and bought out Suddenlink and Cablevision in the past couple of years, and they completely outsource all their engineering, all their installation, all their technical. They want it on their books. They don't want any of the any of the benefit stuff. They just don't want any of it. That's what a lot of folks are doing. But we looked at it a different way, is to build on what we have, train up some new folks. We still have 5 or so installers that have more than 15 years experience. They're not going to do it forever, so we need to kind of refresh what we've got anyway and learn some new skills along the way. So this budget includes 2 new people coming on as quickly as we can get them here after July 1st. Unlikely to get them here much before September, October, because it just takes a while to find the right people. And then the contract labor going away after this first fiscal year.
Okay, well, all good things have to come to an end. And,
Now, I'm at 88 minutes on the under-over, and I bet under, so.
We've got another special hearing set here for a few minutes.
Ralph, I just had one quick question, one area that we didn't cover.
Okay.
Security wasn't discussed at all. Security, could that be bundled with the other items?
On the business side, it is.
It is?
That was part of the new structure that the board approved, probably 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And that's something that David's been selling actively, is bundling that security with
Okay.
data and phone.
Okay.
Those 3 services to business customers.
I think I noticed somewhere that its future looks flat, no change.
Yeah, it is, and that's kind of how we've budgeted it right now. We've struggled in that area, and I think in talking with Travis Fitzgerald that runs the day-to-day over the course of last year, as customers are looking to trim a few dollars off of their account. Used to be HBO, Showtime, that kind of thing. And some customers are doing security as far as a drop. But the other thing that hurt him, and it happened, is that our transition from our own internal switch to Big River Telecom affected some of our lines here in town, and it affected some of our telephone lines, which is what most security systems dial out on. Not all of them, but most of them do. That there were some customers that were pretty unhappy with us last June and early July as that transition happened, and it wasn't seamless. And so having your security system beep at 2 o'clock in the morning because it dropped a line didn't happen very many times in some households, and so they dropped their service. I think we lost about 30 services in the last 12 months. Now, the last couple of months, we're starting to gain some back again. Okay. And part of that is because of of the hard work that the folks in the security department are doing, but I'd like to think that some of the marketing that we're doing, but also some of the direct marketing that David's doing on the business side is helping.
But as far as the budget expenditures, there was no growth in security, I guess, if I was looking at the right thing.
Yeah, no, it's just churning. So you add 15, you lose 14.
Okay.
You add 13, you lose 11. And
But
it's
don't
just-
you feel there's potential there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, but it's also a pretty competitive business. So, with ADT and Bates and, some of the internet-connected guys, what's the one that starts with a V, has orange signs? Vivint. So it's a competitive thing out there.
The other thing I noticed was on advertising costs, that we're spending the same amount each year in the 5-year forecast. But if our potential is going down in those areas, should we still be spending that much in advertising?
Advertising, you mean marketing, or I'm not sure?
Yes, marketing, I think. It's buried somewhere in here.
Well, I guess I would say if we're losing some folks in some lines, we're trying to gain them back in other lines, upgrade them on the data side or hold on to them. It's not always
Okay.
acquisition, but retention is something that we work pretty hard on, especially on the TV side. So, yeah, I'm going to.
Well, I interpret it as marketing for cable products, and
Mhm.
and that we see that as a declining market, so.
I don't know that I see. I mean, I don't know what is the total.
104,500.
No, the total revenue of cable.
28
Cable
million.
telecom. I mean, the total operating revenues of cable telecom is pretty flat over 5 years. So I would say if the dollars are shifting maybe away from TV onto data, and also trying to keep them from leaving, is something that, that's what I spend some of my day working on. But yeah, I mean that's.
Okay.
It's tough to compete with Direct and Dish, who use typically anywhere from 15 to 70% of their gross revenue on marketing, and he uses 1/1,000,000th of 1% of marketing against the same products. We really don't spend. We try and do as much free stuff as we can, or internal things that we can do on our own, and also all the social media stuff that we're doing too. That really doesn't cost us anything but time. So working hard on that.
Okay, this has been a special meeting to discuss proposed budget, and we have another special hearing coming up in a few minutes, so I'll ask if we have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Do we have a second? Second. Discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. I'll note that we have a special hearing to continue with the budget discussions for tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I believe it is. So we have a interim period here until our next special board meeting starts at 5 o'clock.